Hey, look, I'm going up. All right, see you in a bit. Bollocks. How are we doing, everybody?
Chair, yep, are you ready?
I am absolutely ready, Wendy. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Let's just take off the, there we go.
Can we do a roll call, please, Chair, so that we can check if we're quorate as well, and if anybody has an update to their interests.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, so let me just get myself prepared. Right, so Chair, Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Davey, Vice Chair.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey. Okay. Councillor Blakey had to leave the meeting. Councillor Howe had to leave the meeting, but hopefully he will be coming back. Councillor Ingham.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Ledger.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Present, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. So I think we're just about caught. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I make it 7, so yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. And I believe Councillor Bailey will be coming in very soon. She just had to deal with something quickly. Okay, thank you very much. First of all, members and officers, thank you very much for your forbearance this morning, and particularly to Councillor Davey for being Vice Chair. And I'm glad to be back in this afternoon, but thank you for all the work you did this morning on those proposals from the various developers. So we're now into the afternoon's agenda, and this is, as you know, about the site selection for the emerging East Devon Local Plan 2020-2040, findings for the Tier 3 and 4 settlements, small towns and larger villages. We have a recommend I might just wait for whoever that is coming in so they can hear that. Wendy.
That was Mr. Hunter, Damien Hunter.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, good. Okay, I'll carry on then.
Sorry, Chairman.
Yes.
It's Damien. I've just heard the back end of my name. I was kicked out of my computer and I've just managed to get back onto the meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good to see you, Damien.
Was it just to say that I was missing or something?
No, good.
Sorry, Chair, it's Megan here. I've just had a call from Jess to say she's waiting to come in the meeting, but nobody's letting her in. So could somebody sort that, please?
Yeah.
She's not in the lobby.
Oh, I don't know what's happened then, but she is trying desperately to get in. So if you can just keep an eye out for her.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, lovely.
Thank you.
So as we did with the higher tier settlements, we've got a recommendation here at the moment, and I'd like just to amend that at the outset to what we did with the previous ones as well. And the proposed wording, I would suggest, obviously subject to how you feel about this later on, is that we recommend endorsement of the preferred sites and second choice sites as suitable for consultation. That's what we did with the other ones as well. To my mind, that obviously excludes all sites that have been marked as a no by the officers at this stage. So I think, should we go over to Ed? Ed, do you want to sort of say something about this item at this stage as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, so this report is quite similar to the one you had on the 9th of August, which, as Chair said, related to the Tier 1 and 2 settlements. This relates to site assessment work for the Tier 3 and 4 settlements in the settlement hierarchy, so the small towns and villages. Effectively, it's the same format and the same methodology that's been used, so I won't go over that again, but happy to take any questions or queries that members have on that. And obviously you've heard the agent's presentations this morning that are mentioned at paragraph 3.1. You'll note in section 4, in terms of the overall findings, that there's quite a wide range in terms of preferred allocations and second best choice sites at different settlements. This was certainly an issue when we looked at the Tier 1 and 2 settlements, in terms of obviously some settlements had more available and suitable sites than others, and so we end up with this disparity in terms of the levels of options at different locations. I think it's fair to say that's more pronounced in terms of the Tier 3 and 4 settlements, because you will see particularly at the Tier 4 settlements that some settlements simply don't have any suitable sites that we feel we can recommend to you as preferred allocations or second best sites, while other settlements have an abundance of potentially acceptable sites, such as settlements like Fennerton and Wimpole, for example, where we potentially have for preferred allocations, second best sites that equate to, I think, 484 dwellings in Fennerton and 348 in Wimpole, which is obviously a very significant scale of growth in those locations in particular, and there are some high numbers elsewhere as well, but particularly in those two locations, which equate to quite high levels of additional growth in those locations, and a scale of growth that is strategically significant, really, in terms of the strategy that we're promoting and proposing to go out to consultation on. So I flagged that up as an issue for members, and you'll see at paragraph 4.6 there's a table that relates this to the percentage increase in households in those locations, which relates back to a resolution members made back in March about a 10% increase relating to what was considered to be a modest growth at a settlement. And you'll see at the table in paragraph 4.6 that ranges from a 0% increase in some locations where we don't have suitable sites, up to, at its highest, Wimpole at 77.9% increase, if you take into account the preferred sites under our assessment and the second best choice sites. Now, members will recall from the previous meeting that obviously we have a shortfall in terms of housing numbers, and so there is a potential option. One of the options we highlighted for addressing that was looking at more strategic levels of growth at one or more of the more sustainable villages. So the issue of whether or not strategic growth potential should be put out to consultation at Fennerton and Wimpole is raised in the report at starting at paragraph 4.11. And so that's something members may want to consider in terms of both a level of growth that's suitable in those locations, but also whether or not members wish to consult on all of the preferred sites and second choice sites in those locations, and indeed in all other locations as we go through, but I particularly flag up those two because of this disparity in terms of the scale of growth that all of those sites in combination would propose in those locations. Otherwise, obviously, the key issues to note are as before. So we highlight again the AOMBs and their role as a nationally important designation of landscape importance. And obviously, some of the settlements you'll be looking at this afternoon are located within AOMBs and includes sites that are within the AOMB, our scoring reflects the importance of that as an issue, but you will see that there are some sites that are recommended usually as second choice sites that are in AOMBs, but where we feel that because these are on the periphery of the AOMB or read in the context of a wider settlement, they could potentially still be acceptable despite that not insignificant constraint. So the report from section 6 onwards then goes through each of the settlements, starting with the tier 3 settlements, and you've got, as before, a summary of sort of description of each settlement and a reminder of sort of some of the facilities available in those locations, and a site plan showing the various sites that have been assessed and a summary of the assessment. And then at the end of the report, you have an appendix which has the more detailed assessment and scoring for each of those sites for your consideration. As the chair has said, the recommendation is to agree these sites, the preferred allocations and second best sites for consultation purposes. As I say, the only caveat to that really is in terms of the scale of growth in those locations, particularly Fennerton and Wimpole, and we ask members to give consideration to the scale of growth or the sort of how we frame the consultation, I suppose, in terms of the level of growth in those locations in particular, to help to frame the consultation and whether or not a strategic level of growth is considered appropriate, such that we need to amend the strategy that we're promoting through the consultation for the plan as a whole. So look forward to hearing members' views on those issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Ed. I think we were talking the other day that we have there's possibly a further chance at one of the next SP meetings to look at Fennerton and Wimpole, isn't there? I think in particular, apart from just this today. Is that right?
There is, Chair. I was just mindful that if members agreed en masse the sites that are being considered today, then you could end up with a situation where you've already agreed to put all of those sites at Fennerton and Wimpole out to consultation without first considering what would be an appropriate scale of growth in those locations and how we wish to frame that consultation. So I raise the issue now so that can be considered in a logical sequence of events, rather than us coming back to that as a later meeting. But you're quite right. I think the agenda for the 7th of October meeting, which I think is due to be published imminently, also flags up this issue, because obviously it relates to the growth strategy that's being presented through that consultation and into the draft plan. So having some clarity on that and how we address those issues or those options in the draft plan at the earliest opportunity would really help us as officers in terms of finalising that document that we're looking to bring to members to put out to consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the way we'll do this afternoon, if that's okay, is we'll just go through hope to go through all the tier 3s and tier 4 settlements and start off with the tier 3s, obviously. I'll just go through them alphabetically, and if anybody wishes to speak on any of them, please do. So the tier 3s
I've got my hand up, Chair. I wanted to
sorry. Yes, Councillor Skinner, please. So I didn't see
sorry. I'm just trying to, I could tell you didn't see it. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just pull back a little bit slightly, because what you did say just a little earlier was that we would agree with the first preferred allocation sites and then the seconds, and then drop everything else off, if I was clear on what you were saying to that. And what we have got is actually, and Ed would know this because we had a members advisory board panel meeting the other day regarding Country, which is now dropped off the radar. And Ed did suggest to me that if it looked like there was something that could have come from that, and what Ed was suggesting to me was that we need to really, the best place to get it, because I wanted to come through the village process and through the parish council and let the village have a say, is to get it through this particular process. So if I could ask Ed on, now we're right here talking about it, if I could ask Ed how we'd envisage that happening through you, Chair, if you don't mind, because I don't want to miss my moment of opportunity, and then we've moved on, and then it doesn't happen, and I just don't know how that happens. And it would be, I welcome Ed's thoughts on that, and Ed, you'd know, we'd be talking about Plymtree.
So Ed is now the moment for Councillor Skinner, or what do you think?
Or later.
Well, if the chair's wishes to go through settlement by settlement, then we will come across Plymtree as we go through the Tier 4 settlements, and I would suggest that would be the appropriate points to discuss the Plymtree sites.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner and Ed. Right, okay, so now and
Chair, I have my hand up as well.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Ingham. So I'm having a little bit of yellow hand. Right, I can see you, Councillor Ingham, Councillor Parr. So just to say, I'm preparing to go through these alphabetically, but prior to that, Councillor Ingham, yes, please.
Thank you. This is on, the first few pages, not getting into the minutiae. I hear what Ed said about 4.6 and looking at that percentage chart for Tier 4, but there isn't one for Tier 3, which is interesting because you can see there at the top of page 20, Lympstone 197, Woodbury 155. What you have to bear in mind also is, I would suggest that to understand those percentages, there was about 190 odd within Lympstone Parish as part of the environment of Exmouth. So if you add those two together, and you know that there's 750 dwellings in Lympstone Parish, and you're adding those two together, you get 52% growth in that parish. Now, I consider that totally unacceptable. I understand, instead of scaring the pants off Wimpole and the like, what we should be saying is that's way too much. So we should trim that back and make it a number that we can consider. And I think it's unfortunate they haven't done the similar diagram for the Tier 3. And I think we're missing a trick. Also, Ed mentioned about the AONBs. I don't see them as being any more precious than any other designation because they're so old and out of date, drawn up by people who are no longer with us. And we've got new designations like the Heritage Coastline, Pebblebed Heaths, coastal preservation areas, other aspects like green wedges throughout East Devon. We have to take them into account and say, what is it we need moving forward? Not what was decided in 1960. And I think we have to take that on board. And it keeps bringing us back to that and saying, but the MPPF. But, and I have to say, there's also the Localism Act, where people should be allowed to decide their future. That was the whole point of it, and neighbourhood plans. And here, we're preparing a neighbourhood plan, and I believe drawing lines in the sand rather than looking at, a clear blue sky. And I don't think that's correct. I think we should address that, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, so in essence, that's a massive mathematical and philosophical debate, isn't it? But let's bring Ed in for some comments on that, if we can.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think the only reason the table in 4.6 doesn't include the Tier 3 settlements is because my understanding had been that members' resolution back in March was in relation to the Tier 4 settlements. Although I have to admit, by now reading it again as written in paragraph 4.5, it doesn't explicitly say that. But that had been my understanding, which is why I asked the team to do the table for Tier 4. So apologies if members did want that information for Tier 3. I'm sure we can produce that in due course if necessary. But I think it's just a general point really about the scale of growth that we want to present for the consultation. And I suppose my concern, particularly in relation to Fennerton and Wimpole, is because if we were presenting the level of growth we could potentially be, as shown in that table, if we included both preferred sites and second choice sites, those are strategically significant in terms of our strategy. And we would need to mention Fennerton and Wimple, or one or the other, as a focus for growth within the whole strategy for the local plan, if we were looking at that scale of growth. So that is a significant change to the document we're currently preparing. And so that needs to be flagged up. I freely admit that in some other settlements, there are quite significant scales of growth, well in excess of 10% as well. And no doubt those would be discussed as members go through each settlement. But it's really Fennerton and Wimple that are of a strategic significance in terms of that, which is why I highlight those settlements. I would see two key options there, one being in terms of you could potentially still consult on all of the first and second choice sites in those locations, but frame the consultation as sort of saying that these are options, but in those settlements we consider this X number to be a suitable scale of growth. And the same could apply, for example, in Lympstone, given Councillor Ingham's concerns, if members wanted to frame the consultation in that context, of sort of saying, we've got all of these options, but we think X is a suitable level of growth. But there obviously needs to be a logic behind that and a planning reason for that, which is why the report sort of urges caution in terms of this 10% rule of thumb, because I really think allocations need to be made based on the planning merits of those sites and the ability of each of those settlements to accommodate that level of growth, not a blanket 10% across the piece, which, you know, with all due respect to what members were trying to achieve with that is not, you know, a planning basis upon which to decide levels of growth in particular settlements. So that's really just why I flag up the issue. Just to ensure that that's clear in whatever consultation goes out as to what level of growth we're potentially looking at in some of these settlements where there are lots of options, and you may not want all of those options to come forward.
So this is an absolutely right royal chicken and egg, isn't it? So in one sense, if we put out everything for consultation, which has a consistent logic to it, then we present out of the blue, and particularly to Fennerton and Wimple, a massive, as you're saying, Ed, strategic change around those two settlements in particular. On the other hand, are we in a position, really, realistically, on this committee today or on the 7th or whatever, to say categorically not to that, or divide it by 3 and multiply it by 2.5 or something? That's the difficulty we've got here, isn't it?
Yes, Chair. I mean, the other thing to say is, as I say, you could agree that you want to send all of those sites out to consultation as choices, and then perhaps pick up as a later meeting the discussion about what is a suitable level of growth in those locations to frame that consultation. I think that would be a legitimate way forward as well. I was just nervous about, well, I just wanted to make sure members were aware of this issue at this point in time, absolutely, rather than as you know, as at the previous meeting, voting through en masse, and then we stumble across this issue further down the road, having already decided to go out to consultation on all of the sites.
Okay, that's very useful. Thank you. I'm interested to hear from the committee on this. I would suggest probably we should be consistent with what we've done previously, because what we're here to do is hear the maximum feedback possible from the people of East Devon. However, let's go to Councillor Parr, please.
Thank you. Yes, following on from that conversation, I had picked up on paragraph 4.4, where it says it would be odd, if not perverse, for some villages to take what could be substantial levels of housing growth, in some cases potentially more than the towns, which are in a higher tier. And then in paragraph 4.9, Mr. Freeman asked the question, are members looking to tier 3 and 4 settlements to play a much more significant role in addressing the housing shortfall? I really think that, well, where is the coherent strategic logic? In the absence of this, there is a very real risk. The plan will fail at examination. This is what Mr. Freeman is advising. I do think there needs to be a policy, a strategic, there needs to be some thinking. At the moment, it isn't there. I would be interested to hear what Mr. Freeman says about that. And then later on, I would like to come to the Collerton site when you get there. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Barlow, thank you. We were saying, weren't we, chicken and egg 5 minutes ago. Is there anything you'd want to add to what Councillor Parish just said, Ed?
Well, Chair, I mean, I agree. It is an issue that needs discussion. I think it is potentially slightly separate from which sites go out to consultation, as I said, because I think you could consult on all of the sites as options, but I think it needs to be framed in the context of a clear and coherent strategy about the scales of growth in particular locations. I think the only thing I'd really add is that obviously we do have this issue of this shortfall in housing numbers that I've highlighted in previous meetings, and that as things stand, you know, we would have to include all of the first and second choice sites across all the tiers of the settlement hierarchy in order to get to the housing numbers that we need to achieve. But that potentially delivers some undesirable outcomes, which is where the consultation needs to be framed in terms of, you know, where we're presenting a high level of options in a particular settlement. I would suggest the consultation needs to be framed in the context of saying we're looking at this sort of range of level of growth in this location, and these are options. It's all very well, for example, in Exmouth to go out with all of the options, I think, and be less concerned about that. It is a tier 1 settlement. Potentially, if we allocated all of those sites, you could quite reasonably argue that that's an acceptable scale of growth for Exmouth, whether the individual sites are acceptable or not. But going out with a scale of growth shown in here, if you include all of the preferred sites and the second choice sites in some of these villages, is going to set a lot of hairs running in those settlements, I'm sure. And cause a lot of concern, potentially unnecessarily, if members are clear that they, for example, don't want to increase the size of Wimpole by 77.9%. So I think it would be appropriate to frame that consultation in the context of a level of growth that we do feel is appropriate. And I think we need to do that in terms of developing our spatial strategy, the overriding spatial strategy for the plan. Which is another key part of the consultation that we need to undertake. You know, if one or more of those settlements is concluded to be a location suitable for strategic levels of growth, we need to be flagging that up and the reasons for that in our spatial strategy, which has to sit front and foremost in the consultation and in the draft plan, I would suggest.
Okay, so that was very helpful, whilst also being incredibly unhelpful. As somebody genetically Irish, I can say this: like the Irishman, I wouldn't be starting from here if I were us. So Councillor Parr has made a very good point. Really, it's coming through very late in the day to us as strategic planning, really, about these very large potential numbers in Fennerton and Wimpole, and that's an absolutely fair point. She's absolutely right, and you've restated it really, Ed, that this does need some serious strategic work around it. So I suppose the question will be for committee today, really, in respect of those two settlements in particular, are we content for them to be consulted on as sites, or are we in a position where what we need to say is neither of those settlements are ready to go out for consultation? Now, if that were the case, Ed, what would that do to the consultation process?
I think it would be rather odd to exclude them from the consultation at this stage and only lead to further consultation further down the road. as I say. So I think, this is a fundamental issue about the strategy behind the plan as a whole as well. It's not just about those settlements. I would suggest it's not a new issue. This is something that came up with the working draft local plan as well, where we identified a high number of potentially acceptable sites at that stage as well. So it's not a new issue, but it is something that I think needs to be resolved in terms of what's going out to consultation and how that consultation is framed and the strategy that's being promoted through that consultation. As I say, whether or not members want to pick on that now and do that today or at one of the other upcoming meetings is entirely up to members, but it is an issue that needs to be resolved in the next couple of weeks, I would suggest, through the next few meetings.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Faithful, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking through all these proposals, we're looking at houses going here, there and everywhere, and there's practically nothing on employment. And we're just going to flood the place with houses with no jobs for people to go to, or everyone has to go to Exeter, so we have traffic jams coming out your ears. When I first became a councillor, I was really wanting and pushing for startup workshops and the like around the district, and we've got absolutely nowhere on that the whole time I've been on the council. I don't know how long this has been going on for, but I was told when I first started, if you had some startup workshop somewhere, they'd be just about pulling your hand off to get hold of them. There's that much want for them, but still nobody's willing to do it. Maybe that we need to make conditions in there and make sure that there's proper employment going up, not just let builders bang up houses left, right and centre without proper provision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. That's noted. And I know that aspiration is repeated in many neighbourhood plans as well. It's been in the existing local plan too. It's difficult for us because we're not, constructors ourselves to provide that, but it's certainly the ideal. Because the only thing is the nature of the workplace has changed massively in the last 3 years. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I couldn't. My iPad's not working, so that's why I was late coming in. Thank you. I think the problem is that we've got a spatial strategy, and here again we're having the issue, aren't we, that we're kind of potentially going out to consultation on extensive housing that isn't really in accordance with the spatial strategy. And I think that's something that Ed picks up on in his report, particularly in relation to Fennerton and Wimpole. And I think the issue is that I'm really worried that we're going to get to the end of the line and we're going to, if and say potentially you did have substantial housing in Fennerton, then that's not in accordance with our spatial strategy. And I think Ed says, well, that could potentially fail at examination. Is that right?
Through you, Chair, no, I'm saying that if that's members' desire, then we need to change the spatial strategy to reflect that approach and ensure we have the evidence to justify that approach.
But surely the right thing to do is to decide your spatial strategy at the outset and then allocate your houses in accordance with your spatial strategy, not go, oh, look, we can put loads of houses in Fennerton and then change our spatial strategy to fit where we can just accommodate all those houses. So, and my worry about going out to consultation is it's all very well saying, oh, well, we could indicate a level of growth. Honestly, people, if you have 77% growth, first of all, that means that we know the local plan is like a juggernaut, and the longer things stay in there, the more anxiety it causes for people, and also the harder it is. It's much harder, isn't it, for to suddenly pull something out. And once it's in there, even if it's at consultation stage, so I would just question that. And I think we can't change our spatial strategy because, because that is all about sustainability. So are we saying that we're not going to be sustainable? And also, I think in terms of percentages, I understand what Ed says, that it's not, it's not a planning, saying 10% or whatever. But I think there is an argument for as a local authority having community cohesion at the centre of what we do as well, and having huge amounts of growth in any one particular place on the back of already having had substantial growth, I think does influence. And we've already decided our spatial strategy, and we've used words to describe the level of growth to be sustainable. So having a percentage, even if it's just an understanding, is helpful, I think, because that helps us stick to our spatial strategy. So I think, we need to stick with our spatial strategy. We can't change it because it suits us, because we've got one settlement or two settlements, which I think is what Ed's saying. So I'm really quite concerned about this. I'm really quite concerned about our villages in general, because because they're tier 4, because they don't have many services, jobs and facilities, and yet they're all going to be, well, not all of them, but some of them, really hammered through this local plan. And I just think it's all, and I'm not criticizing Ed, but it's all quite depressing, isn't it? I don't see growth as a positive thing for our countryside. Sorry.
You're on mute, Councillor, Chair. Sorry, you're on mute. We didn't hear any of that.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Yes, I don't think any of us would disagree with what Councillor Bailey's just said. Equally, I always have to, in the chair, put the devil's advocate argument of the pressure we are under from the NPPF and from the local housing need numbers, and for the need to demonstrate a 5-year land supply and so forth. Now, who knows what's going to happen with that as we move forward, perhaps with changes of government policy, perhaps even with changes of government. We just don't know. I am particularly concerned about this, and I think it's being said by a number of councillors now, how we square off it's about synchronising these things in the right order, isn't it? Chicken and egg again. Spatial strategy regarding, for example, Fennerton and Wimple, nothing there at the moment. Where is the logic in going out and putting Fennerton and Wimple potential sites out for consultation when you will know that the first thing that will come back from anybody intelligent in Fennerton and Wimple is, well, this is not covered by your spatial strategy. So what are you going? So we're going to reject the whole thing. So this is tricky. However, that's enough from me. Sorry, my thing is really messing about. Councillor Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think in the interest of consistency, we probably should put everything out to consultation. I mean, basically what we're looking at are the sites that officers have identified as being capable of development that have been put forward. I mean, I feel all the time the tail is wagging the dog here, because we don't really get to decide where we put housing, because we have to wait for people to put sites forward, and we put out that call for sites, and then we see where people are offering land that can be developed. So I think in the interest of consistency, we need to explain to the public through the consultation that what we are putting out is just everything that's been put forward that officers think is viable for development. But with the caveat that it's unlikely that all will finally be developed or indeed will go into the plan of strategic allocations. And maybe invite people to express a preference. So people in Fennerton would say, well, we don't want any of it, but maybe there are a few sites that they think, well, actually that one perhaps would be deliverable. So rather than people kind of panicking and saying, oh, none of the above, what we really want them to say is, well, actually, we think there's one or two sites here that could come forward. But all of this, Councillor Faithful has flagged up employment, although I would say there are some live work units going up, I think, at Dunk as well. and quite a few farms are now diversifying and offering small units. So although the council hasn't actually provided those, the developers are sometimes putting those in, and there are a few in Exmouth being provided on the Redgate site, although the price of that is we have to have an enormous sheltered housing development. Yeah, I mean, 4.9 does say that if we are going to ask 3 and 4 tier settlements to play a more significant role, then there has to be a sound and robust strategic planning logic for doing so. So I think Ed has covered that one, and yeah, let's not pretend that we are not being driven by government housing targets. And again, it's the tail wagging the dog. We don't really get to decide how many houses we need or how many we build. That is all driven from central government. And so all we're doing is trying to address that need. And I don't think any of us really wants to see it. We don't want to see the entire countryside covered in housing. Exmouth proportionately isn't seeing that high a growth, but it's still some quite large numbers around a town that is already pretty crowded. And all of our infrastructure, as we've heard this morning, schools, sewage, the infrastructure generally, flooding issues, there are so many constraints on us that it's very difficult to address these targets, but that is what we have to do, and we won't have a sound plan unless we do it, unless there is a sudden change of policy at government, which apparently they're quite capable of doing. So we shall wait and see, but until then, we just got to keep on playing the game and allocating land and seeing what local people have to say about it. But I do think in the interest of consistency, we have to put all those sites out, but explain to people that that is why they are there, not because we want the whole of Fennerton to practically double in size.
Thanks, Ollie, very much for that. It's very helpful. And I suppose, Ed, I know we discussed the common strategy around this recently. In a sense, there is the possibility, isn't there, in the wording of the consultation to paraphrase Ollie, more or less say, tick here if you don't want anything in this particular community, but also, would you please just tick here if there were one or two you might be able to live with? Do you see what I mean? Is that something we're going to be able to do within the framework of the consultation?
Yes, Chair. I mean, one of the ways in which we can ask for views on anything really is to ask people to rank things in order of preference. So we could ask questions, for example, around the allocation options in settlements for people to rank them in order of preference, which might be one option that perhaps leaves the door open in terms of the scale of growth in some locations for future consideration. So that would be one way of presenting the consultation that would address that concern, certainly, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll take 4 more, if I may, unless it's anything urgent, before we then go on to Broadclist as our opener. Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you. And I pick up a little bit on what Councillor Bailey was saying earlier about the strategic plan, the chicken and egg, and I get all of that. That's fine. But this is a document that's quite fluid. At the end of the day, people build houses and people live in them. I don't see house building taking place where the houses are empty. So we've got a crisis. There's a housing crisis, so we mustn't forget that. Where these houses are going to be built, taking Fennerton and Wimpole, just picking up on those 2 examples, I think quite rightly, Chair, through you, I think it's quite right that we put all of those in. I think our comms message to them has to be, this is not what we're doing of what we're going to take all of them, but we're going to see what you prefer to see as the sites which you would see coming forward, and let the public have their consultation. That's what it's all about. That should be the options of which they have. They can make those or be part of the process, which I think is really important, that the public are part of that process and they can in and out with whatever they think. Both Fennerton and Wimple, quite strangely, Talenton hasn't got any at all, and it sits right in between the middle of Wimple and Fennerton, and you're going to put great numbers on them. But that's just slightly different. But what I think is important here is that, but in particular, has been identified, which will come on later on. I think we do need the door open and to have the flexibility to adjust as we go on. And I think, Chair, to be fair, it is very difficult that when you start a process like this, that you think you're going to stick absolutely to that line. Things change, sites change, the numbers of sites change, other issues come in, accidents and the other issues come on. And they're putting quite a big strain on us in being able to deliver. And we're in awful threat of losing our 5-year housing land supply. And that's the worst thing can ever happen at all, of course, at all. So we're struggling here. We're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. As far as I'm concerned, we are still addressing a housing crisis. And the housing crisis, the houses being built, people are living in them. So I think we need to press on. I agree with what your suggestion, and I agree with the suggestion of sticking with where we are. And I think we ought to be putting all the sites in and just see where that is, and then come out the other side of it. And if we get accused of overdeveloping these sites, we say, what we will need to be clear on is the sort of numbers we're looking for from those particular villages, because at the end of the day, both Fennerton and Wimple are villages. They are not towns. And these are very large, substantial numbers coming within them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Ingham, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think part of the problem is that we have to recognise what we're trying to do within neighbourhood plans and the Localism Act. And I believe what we're doing here is mimicking what we did from 2007 to 2015, adopting a very similar strategy. And we've been put in a straitjacket before we started, because there's one route that we're going to follow, and that's it. But the Localism Act was all about not doing it like that. And here we are saying, well, basically the landowners who come forward first will be the ones who decide what happens. Whereas what we failed to do last year was to look at the big picture, have a holistic view of East Devon and how we were going to match dwellings with jobs. We've completely failed to do that. We're now thinking of building houses in areas where there aren't jobs, and historically there never have been, while there are many jobs, in fact, thousands of jobs in the northwest corner of this district, but we're not going to build houses there, not strategically. And I think we're not only missing a trick, we're doing a huge disservice to this district by behaving like this. So I really don't agree with the strategy that we've deployed so far in attempting to deliver, an emerging local plan. I understand that you want to have commonality in what you do in tier 1 and 2, perhaps you should do on 3 and 4, but you started in the wrong place, as you said, Chair, just a few minutes ago, and we're still in the wrong place, and we're not using all the cards we've got on our hand to sort this mess out. And while we're saying, well, we must continue doing what we're asked to do by national government, and there is certainly a degree of truth in that. We certainly did that in the last local plan. So I suggest to you, we can be trusted to deliver the right things. Whereas Exeter, do you know how many affordable houses were built between 2020 and 2021 in Exeter? I can tell you from a Freedom of Information request, 6. So why are we busting a gut to comply on everything rather than requesting time to step back and get this right and then deliver what's appropriate for 25 years or 30 years? Bear in mind, we sealed the last local plan 7 years ago. We've still arguably got 9 years to go to complete that. And in a village like Lympston, where they over-delivered on housing, they were asked to deliver 50 and they did nearly 70. We're now being asked to do nearly 400. That's not part of the Localism Act. And I think we have to be very careful, otherwise people will be furious if we proceed in an inarticulate manner and don't deliver what's needed for our communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. And I agree with everything you just said. So my view of this and the way I'd like to see this going is, unfortunately, before we can do the grand gesture, we have to do our homework. Before we do the PhD, we have to do the basics. We've kind of done the GCSE the last couple of years. This is the A-level stage. This is basically the fruit of the call for sites. It's come back in. We have a process available to us in law that we can afford to do, where we put those ideas back out to the communities. That information then comes back into us. Nothing is set in stone, to use Jesse's excellent analogy, baked in. It isn't baked in yet. Now, if what we wish to do, having done the appropriate work in the appropriate way, is to qualify to go to the examiners, I don't mean the planning examiners, but so to speak, metaphorically, the metaphor doesn't really carry, but if we want to challenge all this, then perhaps next year we could, or the year after, and we can bring in other threads, such as you suggested, the Localism Act, neighbourhood plans, all the rest of it. At the moment, as Geoffrey Howe said to Mrs. Thatcher, our cricket bat or stumps have already been knocked over by the Prime Minister. But we can challenge. We can and should challenge, but we've got to do the basic work first. What we know is if we went Robin Hood at this stage and said, do you know what, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do the work, then the 5-year housing supply goes, and then we get into trouble. And that's the great shibboleth here, isn't it? And we already know the 5-year land supply is going to lapse any minute. We know that already. So we're already on the back foot here. So that's what it's about. But I think all of everything you've said has been noted, Ben, and I think probably agreed with by most people. But as they say, now is not the time. The time is once we've done the basic work, then we can challenge, because that will require national political consensus to be able to do that, I would say. Anyway, Councillor Howe, please.
Thank you, and I set up with an apology because obviously I was late. Are we on agenda item 7? Can I just clarify? Superb. Right, in that case, following on from the speeches that I've heard, and that's Councillor Skinner, Councillor Ingham and yourself, Chair, I concur with nearly all of you. Although I am slightly worried, having come in late. You keep mentioning various communities. Lympston's been mentioned, Fennerton, Wimple, and none of you have mentioned my community, Bishop's Clyster, St Mary. There's actually taken more development than any other, and it's proposed again to take any more development than any other. And as such, I need to highlight Mr. Freeman's comments, 4.7, which regards the 10% figure that we chose to insert earlier on, and because of the way we are constituted and everything else at present, we won't go into that, but it's the way it is. Mr. Freeman has done his job, as he always does, and warned us that, we didn't vote on it, we can still change it and everything else. My kickback to that is, fine, I get what he's saying, and I understand why he's saying it, but I picked, or tried to pick, the sensible number of 10% when we tried to move this to ensure social cohesion of our villages and towns. And it was as simple as that. There is clear evidence when I'm trying to find words that aren't emotive, but when you impose large-scale developments that swamp current populations, without infrastructure and everything else to go alongside it, that seriously damages the cohesion of our towns and villages. So I wish to come back to that, and I wish to push Mr. Freeman to say, no, we should not be allocating more than 10% in any village or community without serious ground reasons to why and what infrastructure will come alongside it, because it is critical. I know most of our villages. I've been to most of our villages one time and another throughout East Devon, as a lot of you will know. But I'll have to talk about the heart, my own village, which I've declared earlier as part of my declaration. But we don't have a doctor's surgery. If you want to go to a doctor's surgery, you have to go on at least 2 buses. The bus service has just cut back its service on early mornings, late evenings, and weekends. And those 2 services, by the way, we did have 3 GPs that basically covered the area. Pinhole surgery has pulled out because it's got too many things, quite rightly, with Crumbrook and everything else going on. So we're down to 2. That leaves Topsham surgery and Woodbury surgery covering my village. To get to Woodbury, well, let's face it, you've got to have a car. And to get to Topsham, well, you could go by bus, provided you can get one, get across the 3052, get up to Exeter, change the train, you can get to the train to Topsham. And then you've got to reverse it to get home again. For most people needing GP surgeries, that itself is a challenge. School, absolutely, cram-brack full. Our latest development, 80 homes, Greenspire as it's now called, wonderful development, great people in it. But that filled the school of in-catchment area. That was part of the remit of what came through. We have a pub, we have a shop, we have employment. We do have employment, but that's the only thing we have left. Everything else is gone. You can sit in our traffic queue for half an hour trying to get out of our village, or you can sit in the 3 to 4, 5 mile, okay, on the odd occasion, traffic queue to Sidmouth, if you want to go any other direction. And coming back to the bus route, by the way, the bus route only goes to Sidmouth and Exeter. We can't go any other direction from where we are. So coming back to the fundamentals of 10% figure is sensible, unless there is serious infrastructure that will alleviate local problems, and we need to vote on those. Coming back to Mr. Ingham's point, we need to make sure there is at least a moderate of buy-in from the communities we're imposing these on. And I suppose that's where I leave it. It's not just my community, it's all our communities. But we have a real problem, and we need to get over this. And that was part of why I was talking to you, Chair, meeting before last, was it, about, Exmouth and the town centre there? We need to kick off that. We need to start really working where we want to seriously and can put houses that help everybody, not just dump them on the cheapest alternative, which is what we're doing. And that's no disrespect to Mr. Freeman, who's pulling his hair out. He lost his hair, unfortunately, 8 years ago, and doing this the first time round. So, it's exactly that. It's a thankless task. We're all in it, and we've all got to get through it. But we've got to find another way of making sure this is rationalised. And I'm sorry, this is not it yet. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can I ask, though, Mike, because this is, your point, nobody's disagreeing with anything that's being said here. Are you happy to accept that we do need to do this element of consultation now, on the basis that all the points that you have made and others have made, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Ingham, Councillor Skinner and so forth, Councillor Faithful, that we can then, having done that, get that really serious work done? I mentioned it too, didn't I? I think as far as Exmouth is concerned, that serious work is being done. I know that for an actual fact. But do you see what I mean? If you were chairing this meeting, would you be saying, actually, let's get these out to consultation at this stage, or do you have another miracle answer? Because I'd love it if you do.
I would love it if I had a miracle answer. I haven't got a miracle answer, but at the same time, I do have to caution us from my point of view of this consultation. If we come up with a magic bullet, I suppose is the best way of putting it, but if we wish to totally rechange how we're basing this development, then this consultation will have to happen again anyway. So if we're going to rebase this consultation, we need to do it now before it goes out. Otherwise, you're just going to waste another God knows how many months trying to do it. You don't gain anything by consulting on this, totally coming back and changing it to what we believe should happen. And then you've got to start again on your consultations, is my understanding. And Mr. Freeman, I'm sure will correct me, but, you know, because any changes you make, you will have to consult on.
So the problem here we've got is we've got an entire box of eggs and a hen house of chickens, haven't we? This is the thing. It's
several foxes on the outside as well, sir.
And some foxes and some on the inside. Who knows? Okay, Mike, thank you very much. Right, so I'm just looking for some of my hand droppy thing isn't working very well. Jess, please, Councillor Bailey.
I think when we go out to consultation, one of the key things that people will want to understand is how is this level of growth, and I hate the word growth, how is it going to impact my services? And what I still don't understand is, have we had a report? I can't remember whether we've ever had a report showing, for instance, GP surgeries, schools, everything. Are they full? Yes, I'm sure they are. They're full here. So, you know, that really worries me, because we're still, you know, going on about houses, but actually the thing that people really need, we haven't really, I don't think we've addressed really, have we? So, you know, it feels like all we're doing is trying to shoehorn all these houses in all over the place. And just picking up one comment from Councillor Skinner, it's not actually strictly true to say that all the houses are being lived in, because something like 2,400 houses are second homes. So, you know, and that's not that much smaller than Cranbrook at the moment, I think. I mean, I know it's grown. So that is a thought that actually some of these houses that we're going to be, you know, destroying the countryside are going to be second homes for people. So anyway, I don't really have any answers, but I am really worried about the services. And I think that if we reach the point where, I think, you know, if we're building up a narrative of what we can deliver realistically in our district, you know, it's the evidence base, isn't it? And I think the reasonable evidence, part of that evidence, is we don't want to swamp our communities, any of our communities, with excessive housing. And I think Councillor Howe, you know, talked about social cohesion as I did, and I think that's one point that we bring forward. I think also the pressures on our services are another point, and I'd like to see some really objective evidence, you know, on our services as part of that decision making. And so I think it'd be really helpful to have a clear report for all our particularly our GPs, saying, you know, can they accommodate all these new houses, and what's going to happen, because already the services are under massive pressure. And we don't want to be making the situation worse, and our schools are full. So I think we need a comprehensive report on that. And apologies if we have had one, but I don't remember one very recently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. I mean, it's such a nightmare, isn't it? We have to get information from the NHS. We have highways to deal with as well. We have Devon County in education and all of this. And then it's fluid. It moves from, you know, week to week, month to month. Funding possibilities for all of those things change as well. So again, I think your idea is one we need to capture today. And when we get this evidence back, we need to see, and we should be talking between now and then about what we can do to sharpen our knowledge base around that. But now, I hesitate to say this, soon to be city dweller, Councillor Richard Lawrence. Well, no, that's not right. But anyway, come on, Richard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've sat back here and I've sort of bit my tongue to a certain degree, but I've got to say what I've got to say. It looks to me like we're running short of a couple of thousand houses, and somebody sat down with a picture of East Devon and chucked a few darts in the board and said, right, well, let's dump them all here, because this plan for Wimple is just so absurd. I mean, you're talking about, Wimple's got 395 houses, and they're talking about sticking in another 350. We've got one doctor's surgery, which is a satellite to Ottery, which is already cram-packed full, as we already know. The local surgery, they do dressing changes and various things. The school is packed to capacity. The entrance to Wimpole is a single-track road, so people have to wait either side to get through. And I'm just reading through the actual report. It says that Wimpole is more constrained. Critical drainage areas, because the other day we had a drop of rain and we had all the manhole covers in the square lift up with fountains of sewage going down through the middle. It says, this is the report, it says Wimpole is served by country lanes, so highway access is far from ideal. There is a low employment density, which means that they have 3 times as many residents available to work than the number of jobs that are available. There are relatively unsustainable places to live without accompanying job-generating uses. Now, in the middle of Wimpole, we've got a low bridge, so you can't get heavy traffic down through. I just don't know where they arrive at this figure of doubling the size of Wimpole and what infrastructure there is here to support it. We have 3 buses go through the village every morning, just taking kids to other schools. You know, it's beyond me. I really cannot understand where these figures come from. Is it just to achieve the figures that the housing numbers we want? Or is it actually something that somebody's looked at and thought, well, we can do this? Because it isn't doable. I can tell you now, this is not doable. I don't mind the 33, that's brilliant. Extra 33 houses, extra 53 houses in Wimpole, not a problem. But I mean, an extra 350? It's a joke. I'm sorry, I don't want to decry everybody's work that's being done, but it's a small village. It's a historical village. It can't take all this. So anyway, I've had my say now. I was going to save it till later, but I thought I'd get it in while everyone else was. Thank you.
Oh, get it in all the way through, Richard. I might be doing the same in your position. Look, the thing is, I'll come to Ed in a second. What we have to bear in mind is that the people who own land and the sites around Wimpole have come to us. We haven't got, definitely nobody in East Devon. I tell you what, let's get Wimpole in. They've come in, and that's why we're having to assess them now. That's the problem. Maybe you should have a chat with some of the landowners, but do you see what I mean? And that then goes back to the difference between the aspirations of people who wish to do well from developing their own land and building on that land, and a community which doesn't want to be that size and hasn't got the facilities. So I still think the way to do this, they've done it. They've been asked to do this. They've done it, test. They go out to consultation. At that point, then your community say basically what you've just said. That comes back to us, and you see what I mean? It's a process.
Yeah, if I could say that, Chair, we're being attacked on one side by Cranbrook coming right up to our boundary. We've already seen a planning application go in for something like 150 houses and a gypsy site, which is part of Cranbrook, but is actually on Wimpole land. I mean, I don't know how much more we can take, because it's like everywhere else. We're just at bursting point, and something drastic has got to happen, and not just say let's stick another load of houses in, because there's no work here in Wimpole. There's nothing at all. The odd farm or whatever, but there's no cider factory anymore or anything like that. So anyway, I've had my rant. Thank you very much.
I remember White Ways of Wimpole and their product very well as a student 40 years ago. It's fantastic. Yes. Well, mistrust might be able to help us. You never know. We've got time. So I'll take 2 more before we, please, if we can then move on to the settlements themselves. So perhaps just a minute each from Councillor Skinner and Councillor Davey. Philip, please.
No, I was going to respond to Councillor Bailey. I didn't agree with it, but listen, let's crack on.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That's very chivalrous of you. Thank you. Courteous, I should say. Councillor Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm just going to respond to Councillor Lawrence, because nobody has looked at Wimpole and said, right, let's let that grow, or Fennerton and said, right, let's just chuck a few darts in there. These are sites that have come forward, and unfortunately, Wimpole and Fennerton are less constrained for various reasons than other sites, so that they potentially could accommodate growth.
They might not want it, and I totally understand that, and I don't think I would if I lived in either of those, and I know Wimple quite well. But those are the sites that have come forward that our officers have assessed as being capable of development. It's not as though, you know, Ed and his team have sat there and said, well, look, Wimple would do. That they are simply telling people which sites have been developed or are capable of development rather, and that's why we're going out to consultation.
I accept that, Councillor Davey, but could I just say, just finally, that on the report it says it makes Wimple an unsustainable place to live with high out commuting levels, and there are no jobs. So if it's that difficult, if it is that unsustainable, why are we looking at bunging a load of houses into Wimple, which is already unsustainable? And it's in the same report as the proposition to do that. I know people have come in with land. I mean, I know we're looking at those people who want to offer their land up. What I'm talking about is the sustainability of actually building in those areas. And we're being told that in the second best sites, that there's 300 odd houses to be built in Wimple. Well, they're not second best sites. They're like 10th best sites. So, well, not even best sites at all. They don't even figure on the radar. Thank you.
Right. Get that consultation form, Councillor Lawrence. Fill it out. Ed, do you want to? You don't have to. Are you minded to come back on any of the contributions in the last 15 minutes or so?
Well, just briefly, if I may. I mean, I agree with what Councillor Davies said. These are sites that have been put forward, and we've assessed them. There is this issue about the scale of growth, but I suppose what I'm saying is we're presenting this as an option in terms of Fennerton and Wimple in particular. We're not necessarily saying that they're brilliant options, but fundamentally we have a shortfall in housing numbers, which was identified in the report that came to you in August, and there was a series of options in that report, one of which was providing strategic scale development at selected tier 3 and 4 settlements. Those options didn't get debated at that meeting, so this issue is still there in terms of that option. And the site assessment shows that, you know, there are available sites in those locations. I'm not saying it's a desirable option, but these settlements could accommodate more than a sort of normal level of growth, I suppose, the sort of 30, 40, 50 houses that Councillor Lawrence referred to, if members believe that that's an appropriate strategy moving forward. There are, of course, issues with the impacts on infrastructure, and just quickly turning to Councillor Bailey's comments. I think it is fair to say, you know, we've got some information about infrastructure, particularly from Devon County Council, which is in the individual site assessments. I'm sure if we went to all of the schools and all of the GP surgeries and everything in the district, there would 90% of them would come back and say they are either at capacity or very near to capacity. I'm pretty sure of that. And I'm sure that they would all come back and say that they have no plans in the pipeline in terms of, if this scale of growth came to this settlement, we would build an extra classroom here or an extra consulting room here. Sadly, it doesn't work like that. Sadly, we need to say, we are looking at this level of growth in this location, and then have those conversations with those infrastructure providers saying, you know, if that level of growth comes forward, then we will get this level of receipt in terms of SIL. There would be money. Is it possible to then have those conversations? Just to go with them with a hypothetical and say, what additional growth could you accommodate in this location, I don't think is going to take us any further forward fundamentally in terms of that conversation, which is why we haven't been down that route. The last thing I would say is, in terms of, I can't remember who raised this, but in terms of consultations, we do need to ensure, if we are to avoid the need for additional rounds of consultation, that this consultation identifies all of the options that members are still wishing to consider and may wish to take forward. Because we can't move from this consultation straight to a publication draft plan and introduce new options, new allocations, new sites at the publication draft stage. We have to have consulted them on them at this stage. So my advice would be best to keep your options open at this stage, so that can be done later on and avoid the need for further consultation. But as I say, this could set a lot of hairs running, and you may want to frame the consultation in terms of a spatial strategy that's perhaps further developed than we've got to so far, given that just following the spatial strategy as it stands does not meet the housing need fundamentally, which is why this whole issue arises of looking at options to accommodate additional growth in other locations, because just following the spatial strategy isn't going to be enough to deliver the housing numbers that we need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ed. Councillor Ledger, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's just a quick question for Ed, really. Obviously, we had the public speaker at the start of the very start of the meeting talking about a pottery. What can we do in there? Because we've stated that they're not a tier 4 settlement. There's a lot of other settlements that have had sites put forward, which if they were in a tier 4 settlement would be absolutely fine coming through, and actually I think would be quite welcomed. Is there anything that we can do to have very small scale growth in certain villages, which we've asked for previously as part of our policy intent to find the shortfall? We'd like to spread it out amongst the other villages as much as possible, but we haven't really seen that coming forward in what we currently see as preferred and second preferred site allocations.
Ed, thank you.
Well, yes, pottery is not a tier 4 settlement. If members wanted to look to accommodate growth in settlements beneath tier 4 in the settlement hierarchy, we would need to revisit the settlement hierarchy fundamentally, and look at where members wanted to set the threshold in terms of what constitutes a sustainable community. I would stress that the settlement hierarchy, I think, has been debated on 3, possibly 4 occasions, and we did present an option. I'm just looking through the old agendas earlier this year to increase the number of settlements within tier 4, but members opted not to add to the tier 4 settlements. Fundamentally, they're not tier 4 settlements because they don't have the range of services and facilities that as officers we felt was appropriate to make those sustainable locations to accommodate growth, and members, when they considered the settlement hierarchy, agreed with that assessment. I would say though, however, revisiting that I think is not going to yield significant additional numbers, because I'm sure even those communities below tier 4 in the settlement hierarchy, like our pottery, would only want low numbers. And I'd also stress the need for an evidence-led approach to this. Simply that a community like our pottery may want growth doesn't necessarily make it sustainable in planning terms for them to have that level of growth. And we need to demonstrate to an inspector that there's a planning logic and that these are sustainable settlements under the definitions in the NPPF and the PPG for them to take growth. The way for settlements, to my mind, like our pottery, to accommodate growth should they want them, is through community-led developments and through neighbourhood plans. And I think the intention from previous discussions through the committee, through the working draft local plan, was to continue to have policies that enable that to happen, so that communities can promote growth through those routes if they want to. But I'd stand by our assessment in terms of the settlement hierarchy, that our pottery and other settlements like that are not currently tier 4 and not by a planning assessment sustainable locations to accommodate growth, and therefore shouldn't be allocating growth in those locations through the local plan.
So Ed, if and forgive me, I wasn't present for the public speaking earlier, but I do know what I believe I know what our pottery might have said. So if what they're saying is we'd actually welcome some, I'm guessing they haven't done a neighbourhood plan. They may well not want to have a neighbourhood plan. They may not have the resources, and given lots of people's experiences of neighbourhood plans being trumped by other things, they just may not want to do it. But is their best way forward, apart from some community-led elements, frankly, to put in planning applications and just do it that way around, and then the decision. I mean, I'm not advocating this. I'm just saying, in reality, if they've missed the bus this time, and it sounds as if that's what you're saying, is it better just to test it through planning for these small sites?
Yeah, I don't think that takes us forward, because fundamentally it won't be acceptable under the strategy that we have in the adopted local plan, or are currently presenting to move forward with in terms of this local plan. So they would be putting a lot of resources potentially into planning application that's fundamentally contrary to policy, and therefore wouldn't be recommended for approval. Obviously, if it had member support and came through planning committee, members could grant something like that as a departure from policy, but I don't think that's a way we should be encouraging these issues to be addressed. Fundamentally, we need to have a strategy that's fit for purpose in the first place, fundamentally. But I do think...
Can I ask that, Dan? Oh, sorry.
All I was going to add was that one of the issues with the last local plan that led to it being held up at examination for 18 months was this issue about levels of growth in our villages. And those that were members at that time will recall that an early version of that local plan sought to identify a number of homes for each settlement that was to have a built-up area boundary, and that was largely based, I think, on a proportional level of growth that also factored in whether or not that community wanted growth as well. So communities that wanted growth had a higher number. But that fell apart at the examination process because the inspector said, well, where's the logic behind that? Sorry, but you have to have a planning logic for identifying levels of growth in those locations, whether or not it's what the community wants. If it's not a sustainable location to take that level of growth, then it shouldn't be like that. It should be an evidence-led planning, evidence-led process fundamentally. So I'm very keen that we don't fall into that issue again. We need to have a clear planning logic, and that's what the settlement hierarchy was trying to achieve in terms of where is suitable locations for growth. And now we're obviously grappling with the issue of what is a suitable level of growth in those locations. But as I said in the report, it needs to be led by the suitability of sites and the capacity of those settlements to accommodate that level of growth fundamentally, so that we have a planning justification for that.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Dan, if you're still there, Councillor Ledger, you're still there. You guys are sitting in this seat for a couple of years. I mean, I sense there might be some frustration for you in that answer. I mean, what would be, I know Ed's given us the live land as it is, but I mean, can you think of any ways of, we seem to have a community saying, we'd like some, we're saying, you can't have some, we need numbers, they may want to develop their community. What on earth do we do?
Then you, as Ed suggested, you set them to the community-led development and try and push them down that way, but they're not going to be in the housing numbers for this local plan. It would just be classed as a windfall site. So then we've got, I just think we're a bit behind the curve with community-led development in a sense that we do have a few small pockets, but it's not something that is district-wide, that's widely used, and it will yield us hundreds each year. It's not a tool that will be used like that. While I've got the floor, Chair, can I just ask Ed, I cannot find either under tier 4 settlements Collie Ford in any of the literature. It states Colleton, but it doesn't state Collie Ford in anything. And I know that there was a number of sites put forward, but I can't find in any of the agenda packs or in any of the site allocations, site analysis for the sites from Collie Ford.
I mean, I was looking for when we presented these options for expanding the Tier 4 settlements, which was, I did eventually find was in March, the 8th of March meeting. And option 1 at that time was to increase the settlements at Tier 4 to include Collerton, Rockbeer, Up Ottery and Woodbury Salterton. I don't recall Collie Ford ever being mentioned as a potential Tier 4 settlement. I think there were particular issues in terms of Collie Ford obviously relies on facilities in neighbouring communities, but you've then got issues of getting across the A3052 to access them. So from memory, I think that was largely the issue with Collie Ford in particular, if that helps.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Councillor Mike Howell, please.
Thank you. And in the olden days, we used to sit down in a room and had a good discussion about this. But Mr. Freeman, I need to pick you up on what the inspector said last time, because my understanding of a memory, and my memory isn't brilliant these days, so God help us all, sort of thing. But we originally just set out a nominal notion of 15 homes per village, I think it was. And that was what the inspector threw out, saying quite rightly, we hadn't assessed the villages for sustainability. Now, you've done that work now. The issue was the scale of development for the sustainability type of the villages. Now, we have chosen to limit this to Tier 4 and above, but we could quite literally choose to go to Tier 5 on a smaller scale development because they are marginally sustainable in a lesser degree, because most of the Tier 4s certainly aren't sustainable with these scale of developments. Or the only other option, and I don't think that would fill the gap, but nevertheless it would take some of the heat out. The only other option we've got is to have a second new town, because that would cover your whole. That would also take the pressure off all these villages, thank God, and everything else. But where that new town would be, because we're going to have to start planning for it anyway at this rate, because every 20 years we're going to need a new town. I am, and it's not a go at our officers, it's definitely not a go at Mr. Freeman or you, Chair, but we need some drastic answers here, because what we're doing is going to kill all our communities, and we need a different solution to what we've currently got on offer in front of us. And I'm just grasping at straws now at alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. And I'm grateful it's not any form of criticism. I can't help noticing there's some terrific sound bites coming from the Conservative benches today about a system which unfortunately you've invented for us to wrangle with. Okay, look, I think that's enough speakers on this item for now. So if we can go forward now, I shall, if I may, look for people who would like to speak about the Tier 3 settlements. We start, of course, we go through it alphabetically. So would anybody like to say anything about Broadclist? So I see no hands on Broadclist. So I'm just rifling down my agenda, forgive me. Alphabetically, I suspect it might be Collerton next, but it may well not be. Broadclist.
Budley Salterton next.
Budley Salterton, thank you very much, Mrs. Shaw. So anybody, any takers for Budley Salterton? Councillor Skinner on Budley Salterton.
Yes, and here we are again. We've done the call for sites and doing it absolutely right and all the rest of it, and that works well. If people are looking at their map, page, is it 15? The one with the Budley Salterton and the red maps on it with Budley.
Yes, page 15, yeah.
15, so just so as everybody else can clue into what I'm sort of saying, otherwise I don't know what I'm really talking about. So if you look at talking about where we could try to possibly ramp up and get some numbers that would fit aesthetically within areas, you could see, and I told because I know this road really well, I've been passing it for nearly 60 years. When you look at the sites between what would say between 03, and if you take those, all of those fields that rattle down through on the edge of those houses, I'm talking about periphery development. What I would say that I realise that they're not in, and I haven't got a clue on them, whether it's Clinton or some, I don't know who it is. I don't know. We'll never clue. I don't know. But what I'm looking at is when we're looking at strategic planning, you would say to yourself, and I'm saying this really on the backdrop of, we're here looking to ramp in large housing numbers into Wimpole, large housing numbers into Fennerton. And I'm not saying all 4 fields. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, what is our opportunity to say, well, do you know what? Why can't we, and I believe our officers have been out to look for some sites as to what they think may or may not be, could work or not work, that if we're really scrambling around here looking for options of what we got to do, why would we not strategically plan? And I know nothing about whether they're flood areas or anything. I don't know any of that. I'm just looking at a map. I'm looking at a relatively large town like Budleigh Salterton. I'm looking at the land that is coming around it, the woodland and that on the left and all the rest of it. And if you were strategically planning without saying, where could we put some houses, and you were a child of 8 years old, I would say you'd look at that map and you'd go, well, you could put some there, couldn't you? Now, on the basis we're fumbling around here to get land, what would be the possibility, and I suppose through you, Chair, I guess I'm aiming this a little bit at Ed, in whether there is an approach to whoever that is, 1 field, 2 field, I don't know, whatever it is. I know there's a little bit of development, or there was a scheme that went on because it all went bust and one thing and another here to the left of O2. And I think it was in there a little bit. I'm sure that was the scheme. There was some there anyway. But what I'm saying is, there's an opportunity that you could fit some development in that I would say, looking at this map, would work. I know no more than that, but I'm just trying to be pragmatic because it looks like we're stuck between a hard place and a rock. And it is something I would have thought worth thinking about. Now, is that something that members think that we could look around in different places and think, but that might work and that might work? Could not necessarily.
So 3 minutes, Councillor Skinner.
Necessarily put in for land. Not necessarily everybody has. So here's an opportunity. Perhaps if we are stuck between a hard place and a rock, and we're not actually inundated with land as to where to go, Budleigh Salterton as a town could take a little bit more housing.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Skinner. Must say, from the chair's point of view, I don't really want us to be. We mustn't knee-jerk response to what the pressure that's on us for numbers and improvise, I think, sites in at this stage when the officers have discounted them at this stage. But Ed, can I ask you to comment on that, if you will?
Well, I think as a general point, Councillor Skinner raises sort of, is it worth exploring sites that have not been put forward? I think is what I took as the general principle there. I mean, I would say we have done we are including sites from 3 different call for sites exercises. So if a landowner hasn't put it forward in one of those exercises, then the chances are that they don't want it developed. But certainly I think where we've got sites in key locations that we do see as suitable for growth, there is an opportunity to do that. I would see that particularly when we potentially start to talk about new community options, that if members are particularly keen on a new community option, but there are parcels of land immediately adjoining it, or perhaps within an area of land that has come forward that hasn't been put forward, then we may well need to start contacting landowners and say, well, would you be interested in order to make a parcel of land work as a new community? And similarly, I think we could do something like that in terms of locations on the edge of settlements, which are suitable for growth. I would question the particular sites in this location, given that Budleigh Salterton is washed over AONB. And that is a large part of the reason why the sites you'll see on that plan have been scored down. So, I mean, we've also got Buddle _01 and 2 and 3 that are sites that have been put forward that are down as second best choices, partly because they're in the area of outstanding natural beauty. So, I mean, that is one of the options, again, for meeting the shortfall, is to to sort of upgrade some of these second best choice sites and say, well, we would look to allocate those and allocate more growth in locations like that, despite things like area of outstanding natural beauty. I think Buddle_1 is also grade 1 agricultural land. So there's some fairly hefty constraints to those sites. But it may well be that in further developing the spatial strategy, members want to look at some of the more sustainable settlements higher up the settlement hierarchy and allocate sites that perhaps are far from ideal in those locations, as opposed to allocating more acceptable sites in terms of an assessment of the site itself, but that are in locations further down the settlement hierarchy. I think, if we go back to the options for meeting the shortfall that was set out in the report to your August meeting, those are two of those options. You could look at compromising and allocating less good sites in sustainable locations, or allocating some of the better sites in terms of constraints, but that are in less sustainable locations. That's two of the options.
Okay, thanks, Sid. So we're still on Budley. I hope so. I've got Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I was very interested in this site, and particularly what Councillor Skinner had to say. But if you read the wording, it says that the site could accommodate around 300 homes, and yet we're looking at 50 second best choice homes. Well, if it can accommodate 300 homes, I mean, we might as well get hung for a sheep as for a lamb, because if we're going to develop it for 50 homes, we can develop it for 300 if they'll go there. And it does say it provides an opportunity for a substantial additional development in a town with a good range of services and facilities. Ideal. Lots of people want to go and live in Budley. I mean, extra 300 houses will do the world of good, and they won't come to Wimpole. Anyway, I'll leave that with you. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Bailey, please.
Yeah, I think I am conscious. I think if I was, I think Wimpole and Fennerton would be rightly aggrieved when they see, how many houses are potentially coming their way and how few houses are potentially going to Budley. Budley's much bigger than Ottery St Mary. Budley's hardly getting any houses. So, I think if we're desperate, then we are going to have to look at towns, and they're more sustainable, aren't they, than our villages? So it does seem to me to only have 20 in first choice for a town that's got a population in 2012 of 6,600. It's tiny growth, and yet the rest of us have 10% in West Hill and 77% in Wimpole. Yeah, Wimpole. And then what would the growth be in Budley? 1%?
Well, it seems to me, Councillor Bailey, that Councillor Ingham can help us here if he wants to move forward with the idea of building in the AONBs. Now, if he'd like to have a chat with Mr. Jupp, alter a bit of policy, get building in the AONBs, but from my reading, all of those sites in Budley, they are pretty much protected at the moment by either Grade 1 agricultural land or AONB. That's the protector for them at the moment. But I understand from Fennerton and Wimpole's point of view, which don't have that protection, it will seem very frustrating, won't it? Councillor, I'll bring him in. Councillor Ingham, please.
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned the AONBs. Back in July of 2020, we were going to have an AONB event where we were inviting a whole load of different bodies to discuss review of these. And you took over control of the council, Chair. That was cancelled, and they haven't rescheduled that event. I think it's high time that event was rescheduled.
Gosh, I couldn't agree with you more. You may remember my distinguished speech, maiden speech perhaps, as a new councillor, looking for us to respond to the Glover review, which I'm afraid the now chair of the council shot down in flames. I think what we had prepared for July 2020 was one of the most implausible events ever, where practically everybody on earth was being invited to discuss this. But I'd love to bring that back. So if you're with me on that, and that's something you think we should look at,
Well, you haven't done it for 2 years. You know, I thought
you
wanted to do it.
I think probably COVID wasn't the ideal time to gather everybody on earth into a village hall somewhere to talk about the future of AONBs. But if you're urging us to do it now and look at the Glover review, and obviously we've lost about 3 government ministers related to that since then, yeah, let's go for it.
We lost 2 years as well.
We did to COVID, Councillor Ingham. You may remember. I've got a daughter in the house with COVID at the moment. Councillor Howell, please.
Thank you. And I need to pick up on AONBs. Yes, we can build in AONBs. No, it is not a carte blanche. You can't build. And actually, this comes back to the fundamental of Budleigh and the other towns, because I haven't seen anywhere yet the housing need assessment for Budleigh. I'm sure, Mr. Freeman, I hope you could give it to us, because I'm fairly sure 20 homes might deliver 5 affordable. That probably doesn't cover the affordable housing need in Budleigh, and that's what we need to deliver. So let's say Budleigh needs, let's say 50 affordable homes. So we're looking to build 200 homes in the area. If you're taking 25% affordable as the benchmark, might be slightly more, but that's what we need to build. If we can't find the space outside of the AONB in Budleigh, it has to be in the AONB. And then you have to mitigate that to make sure it's the best possible location. And that applies for all the communities. We are going about this the wrong way again, and we need to know what the demand is for affordable housing in these communities, so we deliver that as part of our local plan. And that is the fundamental we need to go back to before we make any of these decisions, because I'm fairly sure Budleigh needs more than, 5 affordable homes. But I need the facts on that, as we need it for Sidmouth and other communities as well, because that's what we need to be building from. Thank you.
Yeah, well said, Mike.
So let's just get some clarification from Ed on this. If at the moment Budleigh has this quite small number of homes as we go out to consultation, is what we're saying that therefore presumably affordable homes can be built on exception sites and so forth, notwithstanding it being AONB, but are we saying that effectively until 2040 nothing else beyond these this kind of 20 homes or whatever can come into Budleigh? And we're not saying that, are we?
Well, I think the issue with Budleigh is it is washed over AONB, so the whole town is in the AONB. In reality, what happens is, because it's a reasonable sized town, is you get windfall developments coming forward during the plan period that are infill development within the boundaries of the town, and those are assessed on a case-by-case basis, and generally the principle of that is acceptable, because even though it's AONB, it's viewed in terms of the landscape, if it's within the town, within that wider context of the town and the built envelope of the town. And so largely the needs in Budleigh Sultan, I would imagine, are met by those sorts of infill developments over time. I hear what Councillor Howell says, but we're doing a local housing needs assessment district-wide, looking at the housing needs of the district to drill down into individual settlements. While I can see some merit in that, would be a colossal piece of work. And I would say that all you're going to get is a snapshot at one point in time, whereas we're talking about a local plan to cover a 20-year period. So I'm not sure that you can plan on a 20-year period based on a snapshot of housing need at a single point in time. This is where we need to look at the bigger picture in terms of the needs of the district as a whole, which is why that's what we've been doing fundamentally.
Can I come back, Chair?
Oh yes, please do, Mike.
Mr. Freeman, I fully accept what you're saying, but the reality is, if we're talking about district-wide, people that need affordable housing in Seaton, Budleigh Salterton, Sidmouth, and anywhere in between will probably be told, well, move to Cranbrook or move to, I don't know, Wimple, because they're going to have plenty of affordable homes. That isn't good planning practice or policy. And I get what you're saying, but the fundamental housing need rarely changes much. You know, people come in it, go off it, but unless we're mass building, which Cranbrook was, the rest of the time, as soon as you build 20 homes, let's say up the road here, you know, then you get more people needing affordable housing. So Budley's need is probably not going to fluctuate much, and it'd be nice to know what it's been over the years. Our housing team should have these figures. It wouldn't be that hard, but fundamentally delivering 5, if it's going to be 5, and I doubt it is, because, well, 20 is just small site, isn't even touching the sides, especially when Sidmouth has the same thing almost next door. Exmouth is struggling as well. Exmouth really struggling for 1-bed homes, we know that, and everything else. So we need to go back to the basics of where people want to be, where they need to be, and where their families are, as well as their work and everything else. And if we can't deliver affordable homes where they've grown up, where they want to stay with their grandparents or whatever else it is, their parents, you know, in family communities supporting each other, which is true sustainability, we're going to fail from start to finish. So we need to get this right, and we need some figures to work off of, and not what we're just guessing for the whole district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, very much for that. Mike, can I just ask you again from your experience, as I asked Councillor Ledger a bit earlier, who was sitting in this chair prior to this. Sorry, I'm being moved around here. Thank you. The exception sites. What's your experience of that in terms of delivering affordable homes?
They're great, but they hardly ever appear. We've had so few exception sites over the years, it's incredible. Because the demand, you need so much work to do. You need to prove the affordability of who wants to live in it. You then have to provide it. And of course, our current local plan, Mr. Freeman, and correct me if I'm wrong, is 66% for affordable homes. And most landowners won't do it. There's been 2, I think, 2 or 3. And that's where we come back to, is if it's not going to work, we need to do something else. So,
yeah. So basically, that's the significant line. The landowners won't do it. So you need to find sites on the edges of communities, 15 to 20, something like that, where we can find some justification on the basis of need. And that's nearly always there on these communities. I'm sure, like Budley, where a landowner will not hold out for top dollar in 50 years, but will actually do the right thing. I mean, would you agree with that?
I would, but the trouble is, like, you know, very few landowners will do that. There are some out there that will do that, but most won't. The 66%, I suspect, is way too high. But at the same time, we have to set our affordable housing level for the new local plan. And a place like Budley, where land values are high and everything else, expected to be high, I would kind of hope we'd be squeezing it at 30%, which gives you a chance, subject to valuations and everything else Mr. Freeman will have to go through. But I would like to see our figure around about between 20 and 30% to deliver those affordable homes. So, you know.
Okay. All right.
We've got to try something.
Thank you. So we also remember, really, we're talking about Budley, we're talking about the sites in Budley. So but it's been good to test a lot of arguments around Budley at this stage. I've got Councillor Parr, Councillor Faithful. Councillor Parr, is this about Budley or about Colleton?
No, this is to say that I have to leave the meeting, and I have emailed my comments for Colleton to Wendy.
Helen, do you want to skip straight? If you want to skip straight to those and put them now. I wasn't aware of that. I'm very happy for you to do so.
No, well, I would like to, but it's out of order. And
I'm happy to suspend the Budley item and go straight to Colleton. I think you're the only speaker, so please take your time, but please do. I'm sorry, it wasn't the way you had to leave.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, this is my comments on the site. It's the site at page 20 in the papers. Site assessment says the site has high to medium landscape sensitivity. It's a very prominent position, and there are views into the site from the AONB. It would have a significant moderate adverse ecological effect because it's within the Beer Quarry Caves SAC. There are significant infrastructure implications. Collerton and Seaton primary schools have some capacity, but not to total levels. The committee should know that Collerton Primary School is completely landlocked and it's got very inadequate open space already. I just do not know how you would expand the school. The Axe Valley, which is our nearest secondary school, could not take all the children. So there's going to be expensive infrastructure implications in education. Collerton Parish Neighbourhood Plan has very recently been made, and at Para 2821, the neighbourhood plan states that development above the 200-foot contour has long been resisted by Collerton Parish Council for protection of landscape reasons, and this site would completely contrary to policies in the neighbourhood plan. The parish will not understand why people did all this work on producing a plan at great cost, and it's been accepted by East Devon, and now we're going to railroad through it. It really will be seriously controversial. A planning application for the land at this site was refused in 2016 because of detrimental impact to the landscape setting of the town. It forms a key undeveloped skyline. I cannot agree with the assessment of the potential accesses. Clay Lane and Old Sidmouth Road are single track, very narrow country lanes. They're quite unsuitable for access for around 50 more dwellings. That's 25 on the preferred area of the site and 24 on the second best land. Where are the employment opportunities mentioned? Collerton's lost 70 jobs when Ceramtech factories shut. That site hasn't been redeveloped, even though a small amount of employment provision is included in that application. So employment opportunities are sadly lacking, and development at this land would increase car use with all its associated harm to the environment. Across the road from this land actually is an exception site. We've just been talking about those at Seaway Head. This is a marvellous development. All the houses are affordable for locals in perpetuity. We've had a second subsequent site, but what Collerton wants is affordable housing, not housing which is damaging to the landscape, located miles away from employment and unaffordable to locals. Those are my comments on this site, and thank you very much for letting me go out of turn. Thank you.
You're muted, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parr, for that. So going back, and thank you, members, for allowing me to go out of order just briefly there. Councillor Faithful, is this on Budley Salterton?
Yes, and well, about building in AOMBs.
Yeah.
To me, it's not just about landscaping, but about architecture as well. Going back to building in Broad Hembury, and that's an AOMB. If you have the right architecture, if you make the houses to look the part of what's already there, then surely that should be part of the thing. You should have tighter controls in AOMBs, but to say no to it all the time, I think is totally wrong. Anyway, there you go, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. Genuinely, this was why I was interested in this, looking into national park status for Dorset and East Devon, because I'd had a lot of experience of the national park in Sussex and the South Downs, and what that actually allows is, funnily enough, more homes at a higher spec, because they have to be to a higher thing, and they're also, particularly, the tie to local people is often much more enforceable as well. But anyway, it is another debate, but thank you for that. Councillor Davey, please.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, what we seem to be saying is that we think the second choice site in Budley, well, the several second choice sites perhaps ought to be preferred sites. But I come back to the fact that we are going out to consultation on this, and people will want to have their say about that. I would just point out there was a site built on the edge of Budley, which I think was allowed, although it was outside the built-up area boundary, because it promised 50% affordable housing. Various viability claims then came back. The builder went bust, and it's now being built out by a different builder, but there have been quite a few problems with it. So I think relying on sites in Budley to deliver affordable homes may not be, everything it appears to be on paper. So I think we just need to be a bit wary of that. But I'm not, I quite often go to Budley. It's a great little settlement. It has got a good range of facilities, and I'm sure it could accommodate some growth if that's possible. I think all Ed is saying is the AONB and the fact it's Grade 1 agricultural land count against it, and that is why it's a second choice. Not that it's totally ruled out because it's in the AONB, but just because that sort of takes its suitability down somewhat.
Thanks, Ollie, for that very much. Okay, so we now move on to, I believe, flipping towards my agenda, Colleton, don't we? We did Budley, we've gone straight to Colleton. So, well, I'll now, I don't think I need to leave the chair for this at all. So I live in Colleton, and Councillor Parr has just spoken about the site Collie 02, which is the one that's being put forward as a preferred allocation. I don't agree with what she has said, I suppose, in no more than 2 or 3 crucial respects. First of all, I think that it's on page 21, Collie 02. There's a very helpful comment. If you look at the site, just look at the size of it there, you could see you could get lots and lots and lots of homes on there if you did the whole thing. Nobody wants that. But if, as officers have suggested, you could take what is, as you look at it, effectively the bit on the right-hand side, off the old Sidmouth Road, and it's just opposite what is, as Helen said, an existing affordable housing site. I really don't see what the problem is building in there about at the scale of that affordable housing site just to the south of the old Sidmouth Road on that triangle there with Hill Head. There's a great shibboleth in Colleton of building above a certain height, but those houses are already at that height, and it keeps getting repeated in the neighbourhood plan as if it's been written in ink, and it really hasn't. And if you look at Colleton, well, nearly all of it is well above the town. So I don't think height is an issue. I think a small amount of development will be perfectly appropriate there. I think it would ideally be affordable. I mean, it's outside the built-up area boundary, and so therefore the natural suggestion might be that the landowners would look to it as an exception site. So those are just my comments on that one. But very keen. In the unlikely event anybody else wants to say anything about Colleton, I shall look for hands. Nobody at all. Right, thank you. Moving on to the next settlement, which is going to be Limpston. Do we jump from Colleton to Limpston? We do, because we're doing the tier 3, so there aren't that many. Right, Limpston. Now I'm going to look for some hands. I can imagine some are going to shoot up straight away, and no hands. Oh, Councillor Ingham. I don't know, Councillor. I can't. Was that hand too late? I might have to move on. No, go on, Councillor Ingham, please. Yes.
Sorry, I've got Councillor Young's comments on Limpstone
as well. Okay. Well, let's can we warm up with Councillor Ingham, and then we'll do Councillor Youngs after that. So Ben, over to you, please.
Right. First of all, if we think of the balance that we achieved, tying in with the last East Devon local plan with a neighbourhood plan, we were asked to provide 50 houses and we did nearly 70 in a very short period of time. So I think it's only reasonable that we would consider to do something similar, because they overachieved last time and we only moved on 7 years. So I would be looking for a combination of sites, and we've seen, and this is to put forward for consideration. So there's Limp 1, and then there's ED 73 and GHED 75 that I think are absolutely fine to go forward. We were discussing about what is not logical and what will upset the process is if you're to consider GHED 72 on page 41, which is a huge number of houses on a particularly visual site as you come in to Limpston along what they call the ups and downs, Nutwell Road, from the Exeter direction. I think that would be totally unacceptable. But I do see that the other 3 sites should go forward and be considered. So I'd support them. And I think what's also important is that, you know, over a number of years, we've looked at the green wedge between Limpston and Exmouth. And it's strategically inept because it doesn't actually go far east enough up towards Woodbury Common. And those sites we will be looking at again through consultation. We've already looked at them and they've gone through in, you know, the tier 1 submissions. But I really don't think it is wise to put forward GHED 72 at this stage. And this is what we've just been talking about. If we've already put forward for consideration within Limpston Parish, nearly 200 dwellings on different sites up by Hullam Road, I think that we should recognise that we should only expect to have something like, you know, 50 to 60 houses, yes, again, submitted this time around as well. And then if you look at that, we would be considering a more acceptable number of dwellings, and we'd be looking at something, I think that's more like 5 to 6% rather than 25 or 52. Thank you, Chair.
May I just, out of curiosity, just ask a clarification, Ben, of Councillor Ingham? So Hullam Road, people who live in Hullam Road, do they think they live in Exmouth or in Limpston?
Oh, Limpston. I'm going to assure you from our neighbourhood plan, they must certainly live in Limpston Parish, because Limpston Parish goes up just either side of Hullam Road towards Woodbury Common. And so, you know, because it's a parish and it's a long-standing parish, therefore they consider they live in Limpston. And just to explain that split, Chair, out of the 750 dwellings in Limpston Parish, I'd say 700 are in the village or close to it, and 50 are up by Hullam Road.
Okay, thank you.
Until when they build the new ones, then there'll be a downside wall.
No. What, the new road? You mean the Dinham Way extension?
Goodmore's Farm that has already been approved.
Yes. Yes.
2/5 of that is in Lympstone Parish. Only 3/5 is actually within Exmouth.
It's funny. I think of Lympstone as the bit down by the sea, but I see what you mean. It's in the parish.
Yeah. It's a wedge shape. The thin end of the wedge is up on the common. It comes down, going west towards the estuary.
Lovely, thank you. Really interesting to know that. Thank you. In which case, I'll come back to Wendy, please, to read out the contribution from Councillor Young.
Thank you. So, yes, he would like me to read out as ward member.
Well, Wendy, could you? I wonder if could you get the mic a little bit closer to your mouth, possibly, as for volume?
Yep.
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay. I'll shout. As ward member, I have already spoken about the great number of Lympstone Parish sites included in the Exmouth site allocations, which I strongly oppose. Lympstone residents had an opportunity to comment at a village hall drop-in session. Considering the restraints imposed on this community with narrow streets, lack parking and failing sewage system, development proposals were not very favourable. The Parish Council has already provided officers with their thoughts with a detailed explanation. My thoughts are some development within Lympstone is possible without destroying the unique character of this village. I note the sites recommended by officers at Lympstone 01, GHED 73 and GHED 75 going forward for consultation. The only other site recommended by officers is GHED 72, which is off Meeting Lane. However, the site is not within the parish boundary of Lympstone, but is in the parish of Woodbury. I would support this allocation going forward for inclusion in the consultation if it benefits through SIL and 106 payments, were somehow only the benefit of this site of Lympstone Parish. End of statement.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Ed, can I come back to you again? I just want to be able to reassure Councillors Ingham and Young that all of what is being said now is being captured and it is in effect part of the consultation process. And of course, I'm sure they'll submit this in writing, but it carries weight. These arguments carry weight, don't they? In our consideration as part of the consultation. Is that fair to say?
Well, the consultation hasn't started, so fundamentally comments will
I suppose
they will need to be made through the consultation when that's launched. At the moment, the comments are, as I understand it, being made to influence the views of this committee in its decision making today.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. Good. Right. Thank you for that. That's Lympstone is there. Right, moving down alphabetically, we go to Woodbury. Now, Councillor Young kind of covered a bit of both, didn't he, there? So would anybody else like to speak on Woodbury? Councillor Ingham, please.
Thanks, Chair. This comes back to the overindulgence factor, scare the pants off. Just look at how many sites are identified at Woodbury. I think it's worth bearing in mind that back in, say, 2014-15, when we were running out of a 5-year land supply, and we were asking Woodbury to consider, like Lympstone, 50 more dwellings within the emerging local plan that hadn't been ratified, then suddenly they had planning applications approved for 80 houses, 80 in 18 months, which kind of undermines the concept of neighbourhood plans. Now, look at what has been put forward. You can put forward all of these, but doesn't that undermine the value of them? how serious do you take them? Through consultation, we already know that the vast majority of people in Woodbury, when they were asked, wanted the one specific site. On page 45, Wood 24, can you see that? That's going up Castle Lane towards the golf course. Also, for my mind, you know, I know officers don't like that one, but that's the one that people have said they want, you know? And what's the point of a Localism Act if we don't listen to people? Say what you want and then we'll ignore you. Also, perhaps Wood 10 makes sense to me, but there's a huge number there that I believe are unworkable. And I just think that if you earmark, you know, strategically a number as high as we have done for this, then people are just going to say, well, what's the point of all this? You're earmarking about 175 houses. We've just have a coach and horses driven through the emerging local plan last time round. Is that going to happen to Woodbury again? You can put those forward, but you're going to be upsetting a lot of people, and I think that's what we should be considering. I can't make you cut those down. I would have thought that Wood 24 and Wood 10 are ample for the next 10 years. And you know there's going to be another emerging local plan in 10 years' time, if not before. So let's not pretend this is about from now until 2040. It's about from now to 2030. And we shouldn't overcook the egg. So I think we should be very careful about what we say is appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Oops, sorry. Zoom is there with you in a sec. Thank you, Councillor Ingham. And again, I'm sorry to keep saying it, but really do urge you, please, to put these excellent comments into the consultation. We've clearly got a decision to make further down the line. How many of these we can actually live with, and indeed whether some that will go out to consultation, whether the community, for example, in Woodbury, come forward and say, well, we'd rather have this one, definitely, and we can listen to that, and we will listen to that. Thank you. Right, so that was Woodbury, and we've got another comment to be read by Wendy, please, on Woodbury, and then after that, I propose we take a 5-minute comfort break. So Wendy, please.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this is from Councillor Young as Ward Councillor. From the feedback I've received from the various drop-in sessions for residents at various village hall meetings, there are some key points I would like to make. Development elsewhere, and specifically the Deanon Way extension and Goodmore's Farm, there is concern that the B3179 through Woodbury would become even more popular for commuting traffic. Therefore, traffic management and safer pedestrian crossing will need to be improved in the village. If further development takes place in the parish, the biodiversity and access into the countryside with more footprints and trails would need to be footpaths and trails would need to be increased to compensate the loss of open countryside. The parish has drafted a green strategy to include these proposals, and the expansion of the green wedges within the parish has been proposed. This has recently been sent to the planning team for consideration. I do not agree with not including Woodbury 09, as this site is within the heart of the village and would be appropriate for low density housing for the less able, as it is near the village services. Therefore, I would suggest leaving this in as an option for consultation. I agree with including Woodbury 10, but I do believe that Woodbury 12, which is adjacent to 10, and to the preferred site of Woodbury 16 would be of benefit to be included for consultation. These three sites combined would provide all the housing needs and all the required facilities in one area, and subject to costs could provide some additional benefits. I cannot support Woodbury 20 as it is on a lane without a footpath, and a large section of the site is community orchard and community dog walking field area, plus car parking for the very popular cricket club. Losing these facilities would be detrimental to the community. I also cannot support Woodbury 23 as it is some distance from the village centre with no public footpath along a very busy road.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for that. Thank you. Right, can we please now have a comfort break until 4:05, 16:05, if we're on Dad's Army, and then we'll come back for tier 4, and let's see if we can get through all the tier 4s before we shut this evening. Okay, see you at 4:05, if that's okay.
Members, if I could just remind you to mute your microphone, please. Thank you. When you're ready, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, members, officers. Back after the short break now. Now we go to the Tier 4 settlements. It's a long list of settlements, and I think what I would suggest is that I just, rather than going through them bang, 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 bang like that, I'm sure we'll all know which settlements you want to speak on. But just on a show of hands, could I just ask how many people will wish to speak? Not in general terms, because we've had a really excellent general discussion earlier, but on some of the settlements. Got Councillor Loudon, Councillor Howe, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Lawrence. Okay. Can I just go through you? Councillor, and keep putting your hands up. Councillor Loudon, I imagine it might be Sidbury. Okay. Councillor Howe, which part of your empire will you be speaking about?
Well, Clifton Mary, but I also want to bring up another issue, but that's separate, if you get my meaning. More general.
Certainly is. Okay,
yeah.
So Clifton Mary, so Sidbury, Clifton Mary. Councillor Bailey, is that going to be West Hill?
Yes, please.
Okay, Councillor Lawrence, Wimple? No,
Yes.
what? Wimple?
Correct.
Okay. Is Wimple in Tier 4 as well? Oh, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. And then Councillor Ingham will be Exton. Okay. Councillor Skinner.
Broadhembury, Payembury, and Plimtree.
Oh, blimey! You do that to me. Right? Can I write those down, please? Plimtree.
Broadhembury.
Broadhembury. Okay. And
Payembury.
And Payembury.
And Plimtree.
I've got Plimtree. Plimtree, Broadhembury, Payembury. Excellent. Thank you. And Councillor Pratt.
Tipton, St John.
Okay. Right. Okay. I'll do my best then to go through those alphabetically, but do stop me if I get it wrong, which is not at all impossible. So can we come first then to Councillor Skinner on Broadhembury, please?
Right. Thank you. You're bustling me along now.
Oh, sorry about that. I know. It's just,
crack on then. Right. Okay. There was somebody spoke earlier talking about Broadhembury, and Broadhembury, I just want people to know, is a beautiful, beautiful village, and it's very old, and we must keep it like it is.
You're filling now, Councillor Skinner. I know it's a beautiful village. East Devon, lovely part of the world. Are you ready yet?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, one of the ones that I'm keen to sort of promote a bit is if the village wants to promote it, and it is 07. But I think in all honesty, some of the other sites were 04 and God, I can't see this, 06, isn't it? Oh, sorry, 06. Yes, I got it now. I'm quite happy for those to go in. I think it's quite important we sort of have those in. The one I prefer the best, I think, which is I know I'm going to be guided very much by the parish and the people of the village of Broadhembury. It's not just my views, and that's the 07 one. And it's I just think that it sits just outside the village, and it does need. Although I remember who spoke, it was a letter that was written in, and it was early on doors. Chair, which you weren't here at that point. So I think that I would like to see them all go in. I would like to see that the village then has the ability to have a look at what they want to do, and I'm would very much want to be driven by the village. The one that was at the Hall office, the most sort of significance in delivering, it's very close to the village, but we must be mindful of protecting the village and looking in its character, in the way that it looks. So it's really important to get that balance right. So I'll say no more than that, Chair, really. I don't think there's anything else to add. It's only a small village, and that's the wish list.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. I think logically we go next to Councillor Howe and Clist St Mary. I've just called up his map there. My word, looks like a war zone, doesn't it? So, Mike, over to you, please.
Well, thank you. And obviously reminding everybody of my declaration earlier, because I have the shop in this village.
I mean, it's almost as if you're advertising this shop now, Mike.
I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't, if you get my meaning.
But you do a lovely sausage roll there. So after you.
Thank you. Obviously, my initial impression, and I still feel we shouldn't be getting any because of the development we've had. But I do need to pick on the 2 preferred site allocations and 1 tier 2 allocation. And I'm going to pick on these in particular. South 09, as it is, which is one of the preferred allocations. It's right in the heart of the village and everything else, but it's right on a road that has no street path. It has extremely congested, heavy vehicles, heavy agriculture, and everything else. So I don't feel that should be a first tier allocation. If we need a first tier allocation, and it's mindful of the presentation we had this morning, and although I'm not in favour of it, I wish to bundle together South 11 and South 03. And my thinking behind that after this morning is they can put a link road in from the 3052 into the country lane, which would stop an awful lot of the rat run. That is the only benefit I can get out of any of these developments. And that is really, as you know, I'm trying to do my best for the village, if you get my meaning. If we've got to have something, those 2 make sense, but no others make sense on their own, if that makes sense. So, well, too many senses. I need to go. So, unfortunately, I do have to go and pick up my son. So hopefully that is okay with you guys. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Mike, very much for that. What you'll be doing with that road is reducing the passing traffic past your own shop, won't it? And you'll be losing trade.
Look, well, I've got enough problems with trade as it is, but you know, it is. If we're going to have development, that is the only thing that offers anything to the village to take away some of the problems, shall we say?
Great, thank you very much. Thanks, Mike. So moving alphabetically next, please, to Councillor Ingham, Ben, and Exton.
Hi. If you look at page 76, you can see Wood 1, Wood 27, Wood 28. I'm not sure how welcome all of those will be, but I think it's credible that they are put forward. They would represent growth of 15%, which I believe is excessive. That's if you look at Wood 1 and 28, that equates to about 15% growth. Too much. But that could be trimmed back, couldn't it? So I think they can be considered. And I'm really pleased that Wood 41, as described on page 78, is out. That would be totally unacceptable. And I know it would be to the residents, because as 1 or 2 houses over the last 10 years have been added to Green Lane, which is right by that purple patch, just to the west of it, between the purple patch and the river. As 1 or 2 of them have been added, people have been furious. So if you filled in that purple patch, I think you can understand how Hexton would feel about that. So I'm absolutely thrilled that's not to be considered, because it's totally unacceptable. But I think you can put forward the other 3 and see how they respond. They won't want it all, but it's reasonable to ask them what they do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ingham.
Sorry, Chair, it's me again.
Oh, Wendy, please.
Councillor Young has got something to say as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, he would like, Exton is a small village with the busy A376 Exmouth-Exeter Road. The main village is on the estuary side of the road, and Wood 28 is recommended by the officers. Is on the landward side, separated from the facilities by the busy road, but there is already a pelican crossing. The access will be off Mill Lane, which has a history of flooding most years, and the lane is in flood zone 3. I could only support this site for a maximum of 20 houses, which was the original suggestion, and if the flooding issue is resolved. I can confirm that Devon County Council has included this flood scheme in a funding bid, which will hopefully resolve the flooding shortly. The other proposed site by the officers is Wood 01, which I again support going forward for consultation for the local plan.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Wendy.
Chair,
yes, please, Mrs. Shaw.
Apologies. Before we go any further, I understand there was a statement from Councillor Young in relation to Dunkeswell, which we have passed on the list. I don't know whether Wendy...
Councillor Young and Dunkeswell.
No, it was Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown.
Oh, well, let's thank you so much for that, Mrs. Shaw. Let's go back to that then, Wendy, if you've got it there, and we'll record that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, I do. Okay, so he would like me to read out. Dunkeswell in the past has been classed by the inspectorate to be unsustainable because it doesn't have a school. I understand over 100 children are bused to schools in other towns and villages. It only has one shop, no public house, although it does have a social club, Indian restaurant, and on the outskirts a hotel. A limited regular bus service, and the main transport is by private motor car. If development is to take place, then in my opinion, the planners should give change of use to the 60+ chalets on what was Blossom Hill, now called Hornbeam, which has holiday restrictions, although there are a number of residents living there full time, which was agreed by East Devon. Not only would this give the opportunity to buy at the affordable end of the market, but would help East Devon increase its housing availability to local first-time buyers. I and the Parish Council think it would be wrong to build extra houses in an area that, on a number of occasions, the Planning Department have won appeals on the basis that this village is classed as unsustainable.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you, Councillor Young, for that as well. So that is excellent.
Councillor Brown, not Councillor Young.
Oh, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. It was indeed Councillor Brown on Dunkeswell. Right, we now come alphabetically next to Fennerton and Councillor Lawrence.
Not me, sir.
Oh, who was going to talk about Fennerton? You're Wimpole.
Alistair Bruce is the ward member for Fennerton.
Okay. Oh, so there's nobody.
I believe Wendy has a statement for Fennerton.
Thank you. Who's that from, Wendy?
Councillor Young. Would you like me to read it? I know
it's a Councillor Young. He's now commenting on Fennerton.
Well, he's doing it as a portfolio holder for flood resilience.
Ah, fair enough. He's a man. He's like Noah, isn't he? Really, he's all over the place. Right, go on then. Yes, please, from Councillor Young.
Okay. So, sorry, it's been a long day. I'm glad you have taken advice from our engineer regarding the critical service water flooding issue in both Wimpole and Fennerton. Obviously, residents from these communities will be most concerned with the fear that more development could mean more flooding, which must at all costs make sure this doesn't happen. We are working on the Fennerton scheme right now. So he goes on to refer to Fennerton 01. Could, with a well-designed drainage system, help reduce flood risks to Fennerton and Gosford and add further resilience at the location, which our scheme does not. Therefore, if designed to provide extra water retention than normal practice, this would be a net benefit. 04 and 05, the developers are aware of an existing culvert running through the site, which they would be responsible for, and they are aware of the existing flood risk at that location. There would be a great benefit to open this culvert up to become an open water course and potentially slow flood flows down, so a net gain. 07 is located at the head of our scheme. With this field, when this field has been maize or bait solid in the summer, it has led to flash flooding. Development here with additional storage would reduce flood risk for everyone. Carries on. Fennerton 08 is similar to 7, but to a lesser extent, and our flood scheme is designed to allow water to drain, and with additional storage again, it would help in reducing flooding. Fennerton 09, this is a large site with the site field in the main cause of the level crossing, flooding and properties to the south. We have a video of it being baked solid, and during rain had a lake on top of it, which left through the field gate and down the road. Storage and allowing the land to drain to the west would significantly reduce flood risk. Fennerton 10 is a tree-heavy large garden, so from flood risk perception, difficult to improve. Therefore, if any of these sites come forward with some joined up thinking and cooperation, they could provide a betterment to the flooding issues experienced in the village.
You're on mute, lead chair. Mute.
Lead chair, I'll take that.
Yeah.
So the no back chat. Okay, and we come, since his microphone is open, to Councillor Skinner now, please, on Pay Embry.
Good. Right. Yeah, you got me out again. Give me
you know.
Oh, I got to rattle on a bit here. Pay Embry. Ed might be able to help me a little bit, because we had a planning application. I believe Pay Embry 1 came in as a planning application and was passed. Ed, could you confirm with me? Sorry, is Ed there?
I would have to check, Councillor Skinner. I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I'm just reading the comments. It does say southern half of site has planning permission and the reference 22/0989/MRES. Northern half of site more exposed and poorly aligned. So it sounds like the southern part of the site has permission.
Yeah.
But it's not one of our preferred or second best choice sites. So I think the southern half has permission and the northern half is unacceptable.
Right. The old vicarage one, that's just come in. So yeah, that's well, Chair, through you, I'm all for letting the villagers have a go at these and see what they want to do. But I'm sure the Pay Embry 01, I'm sure I wouldn't like to say how much of it would pass, but we certainly had a planning application not a month ago or maybe 6 weeks ago, and some of that was within that site and was passed.
It says 9 dwellings, Councillor Skinner.
9 dwellings, was there? Right, okay.
Good, lovely. Thank you for that on Pay Embry. I'm afraid it's back to you. It's Plimtree next, Councillor Skinner.
Oh, well, I could have rattled on again. Or at least it's my last one, though, Chair.
Well, it is. And if what you want to say is let's take it out to consultation, I'm happy to accept that.
Yeah, well, I think, I tell you for why. I'm pretty sure Plymouth 3 was one that came to a members' advisory panel only last week, of which Ed was at, and we could see lots of benefits for the school and for the village, and it wasn't in it, not a preferred site. So I very much like to see those go in, and I'm quite happy for the others to go in. But I wouldn't be promoting Plimtree with Plim 01, 02 and 04 particularly. I'll let the village deal with that, but I wouldn't think that would be particularly acceptable, and that would be all far too big. And Plymouth 3, I believe, was about 30 houses, and I would have said that for a village of Plimtree was more than enough, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Skinner. So next we go to Councillor Loudon and Sidbury. Over to you, please, John.
Thank you, Chair. I've been waiting all day listening to you, and suddenly you caught me off guard. Anyway, turning to the site that you heard about earlier on, and that's at page 180 in the documentation. I'm slightly conflicted because on the one hand, I genuinely understand the local need for affordable housing, but I have genuine reservations about the site, and you heard some of it through my questioning earlier on. So the first is access. If you look, there's three possible options. One is, I said earlier on, to the left of the site through Ebden Lane. And if you look at the documentation that the developer put forward earlier on, that is cited as option 1 at slide 8. Second is at the bottom of the site on the A375 at Chapel Street, which the developer said seemed to be their preferred option, and Councillor Pratt, I think, expressed some surprise, shall we say, at that as an option. And I genuinely I'm rather surprised at that myself. I don't see it working. It's a busy road. And at that point, I think it's probably quite dangerous. The other option is to the right through Firs Hill Housing Estate. And if you look at the comments at page 181, that is the DCC Highways preferred option, which clearly the developer has overlooked. Secondly, connectivity. I talked earlier on, our bus timetable has been cut of an evening. We're down to 2 buses on a Sunday. So we're struggling with that. The issue about the cycle path was very heavily trailed and relied upon by the developer. I was very surprised when he said that funding was there for phase 1. It wasn't what the county councillor said on the 8th of August publicly. And this afternoon, he's confirmed to me no earmark funding for phase 1, only route development funding, and that for phase 2, that would be reliant upon the developer paying for it. So I see that as a big flaw in this proposal. I talked earlier about infrastructure, and I've followed your debate about infrastructure through the day. And I repeat what I've said about the primary school. And again, if you look at page 181, it says there, under infrastructure implications, Sidbury Primary School has no capacity to support development. Well, the developer clearly hasn't read the documentation, I would suggest. And I was rather surprised at how, frankly, I thought it was quite a lazy presentation today, because it just seemed to parrot what was said back in January.
That's 3 minutes, Councillor Loudon. 3 minutes.
Okay. I can't hear you, Chair. You're on mute.
Happy to allow 30 more seconds, Councillor Loudon, if required.
Okay, just briefly to say, this is a bigger footprint than was put forward in 2017 when it found favour, as I recall, under the GESP proposals. And there was some local support for it then. I wonder whether it would continue to get that support. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Loudon. Absolutely no worries at all about that. We now go to Councillor Pratt and Tipton St John.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to Ottery 04, and it's the land at the south, or located south of Otter Close, which has been recommended as a second best choice allocation. The recommendation, following discounted areas on the site, is for 45 dwellings. This site can be accessed via the Sidmouth Road, although there is a lane also running up to the Sidmouth Road, which is located at the front boundary of the site, which would need to be closed to vehicular traffic. The site is large and relatively level. but it has a history of previous planning applications being refused. And on a previous appeal, the inspector refused a scheme for 19 houses on the basis that the village was not sustainable. As members know, Devon County Council are trying to find a site to relocate the school. And any significant development within the village should therefore consider the requirement for a new primary school site. Devon County Council educational officers require the school to be closed and relocated to Ottery St Mary. But this site may be an opportunity for the school to be relocated to the village, within the village. So one of the points I would like to make is that this should be given an opportunity to be discussed and referred to in the public consultation documents. I think that's all I want to say, Chair, on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pratt. Which is a good moment, I think, if I may, for 15 seconds, just flag our next meeting on the 4th of October. And item 8 is about our consultation strategy. It's a really key item because that is going to support and underpin the way in which I think we've been proceeding over recent meetings, if we can get to the end today, which I hope we can, with the forbearance of the DSOs. We have
I just quickly speak, please, Chair, on Tipton.
Yeah, quick as if you can manage the quick.
And I will do very quickly, because absolutely did I support or did not support the move of the school being closed at Tipton at planning, and very much did not want to see it move into Ottery St Mary. And it was said by Devon County Council they've looked high and low for sites, and they couldn't find one. And you're quite right, Councillor Pratt. Isn't it funny when a call for sites comes forward, a couple of sites come forward, and there could be one. So I very much support what Councillor Pratt has said, and it's really important about what he's doing, and I'll very much support him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. So next we come to Councillor Bailey and West Hill, please.
Thank you. And yes, I also support Councillor Pratt. So I think it is really important with regards to Tipton. So in terms of West Hill, I'm really pleased to see that some of those outrageous sites are not going forward. But I still think it's too many. And so there's 3 sites: West Hill 01, West 06 and West 04. And so what concerns me is that when we heard from developers this morning, the numbers of houses that they're talking about were greater than the numbers of houses in the chart. So I'd like to see all of them come out, to be frank, but I in particular do not want to see the numbers creeping up. So I think that they should all come out. And the reason why is because I don't believe West Hill is sustainable, because everybody virtually is car reliant. So they're all on greenfields, which I never like. There's no jobs in West Hill, so everybody's going by car to other places. Very limited bus, no school places. And we don't even have a playing field that people can use. So where, there's more and more children, nowhere for them to play. There's a play park, but no playing fields. And I think it's just about that feeling of, so the way we approach planning is we're looking at all the individual settlements, but then we forget that we're all interconnected, and our area has been besieged with housing over the last 10 years. There's been substantial growth in West Hill, in Ottery St Mary, and elsewhere in the northwest quadrant. So what I feel is that residents, and this was raised to me probably more than any other issue on the doorstep last year, that there's been enough housing. And I don't see that being factored in anywhere in the consideration of the sites. And so, for instance, I was just totting up, and I'm not trying to pick on Budley, but I'm just using them as an example of a settlement, a sustainable settlement that's had really, really limited growth for 10 years. And it just feels that the villages are taking a disproportionate amount of housing. And I don't like to call it growth because that sounds popular. And, like it's all going, but we never get anything. We never get any improvements. It's never better for us. It's harder to get to the doctors. There's more pressure on the roads, and there's no school places because they're all full. So, this is the reality. I don't like the sites. I don't want to see them developed. They're destroying the natural environment. They're, making
3 minutes, Councillor Bailey.
And that's what I've got to say. So I'd like to see all of them come out, and I'd like to see, a fundamental rethink. But maybe that's a comment for another day. Thank you.
Yep, please do that and come back. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Now, do please, as many of you as possible, hang on, because we need to take a. Mrs. Shaw, are we going to be quorate for a vote? Basically, just on the recommendation of endorsement of the preferred sites. Second choice sites as suitable for consultation. How many have we got left?
We have 7 of the members of committee, and to be quorate, we need 5. So therefore, we are running tight.
I'll take your names. Right. Okay. Can we? So, right. Is it so, Councillor Faithful? Is it specific to one of the settlements, please? Is it West Hill?
It's about West Hill, yeah. It's just to say,
thank you.
When they first built Beach Park, the middle was supposed to be open space, and they built houses on it. The same with Moorlands, and they built houses on it. And you just, everywhere, it's just like Councillor Bailey has just said, every piece of space they're supposed to have, they built houses on it. There used to be a playing field on the corner of the War Memorial, and that's where West Hill Football Club used to play. And now they're playing down at King's School playing field because the ground has been built on. Every space they get, they build houses on. So they really need to make sure there's proper space in the village. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. On West Hill, Councillor Skinner.
Only very quickly, and I want to decry what Councillor Bailey is saying, but not very far from West Hill, of course, we've got, go on the Sidmouth Road, you've got Greendale and Hill Barton and Creeley Park, create quite a lot of employment. It isn't very far away. As far as the town is concerned, Optree St Mary's just over the other side of the hill. What I will say is, and what I will support her in, is that all of these coming forward, I don't agree in not having any of them, although she did say she's in for 2 or 3, but West Hill is getting inundated here, and that is just not right. And so I agree in some of it, but some of the comments that have been made, I don't agree with that. That's just, everybody's got to travel a bit to work. There's no distance from West Hill to Greendale or Hill Barton. If that's where you're going to work, no distance at all. Like anybody else got to go to work. So there you go. Just want to keep
Good
it
news for West Hill. You're on the M5, Jess. Fantastic. Right, and so the finally then, Councillor Lawrence, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly reiterate the points I made earlier, that Wimpole is a small village. There are 3 main access routes into Wimpole by road, and each one of them goes through a single lane section. So there's always build-up of traffic. We're supposed to have 10 local facilities. The doctor's surgery is a satellite of the Ottery one, and we already heard that the Ottery one is jammed to the gunnels with people wanting to see a doctor. The access is poor. There's a low bridge coming in from one direction, and we suffer from flooding, and when it rains we get lots of sewage running down through the main street. So that's just the downside of thing. We have low employment in the area, and this all comes from the report from the officers. So they're saying we've got a low employment density, which means they have 3 times as many residents available to work from the number of jobs that are available. So it makes it an unsustainable place to live. That's what the officers say. I don't know what we can do about the job situation, if anything at all. But going through the plan, Wimpole 03, there are no footpaths, it says on there, and that's true. Wimpole 07, which is another one which has been looked at, there are flooding issues. Wimpole 08, there are poor pedestrian and cycle links to the village centre. Wimpole 11, floods, and Wimpole 13 is too remote from the village centre. So I'm not against the village expanding, and I'm sure that the people within the village want some form of expansion. And I think that the recommendation of 33 homes in the preferred allocation sites is probably about the right figure, because that's, you know, like, I don't know, 8% or whatever, maybe a few more, you know, but certainly not doubling the size of the village. It'll never work. And, you know, there is so much infrastructure that needs to take place for even a relatively small expansion. And I just don't see it working, really. But I don't want to take them all out, but I think we ought to look, we need to be a little bit pragmatic and look at what will work rather than just bombarding it with a load of sites because they've come forward. I mean, because somebody puts a site forward doesn't make it right to build on. And having so many, you know, we can pick and choose which ones we want, really. But we've got to pick the best ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, very much for that. Really judicious comments, and it's heard. It's heard by this committee, absolutely. And I'm sure your constituents will appreciate what you said. So once again, we keep saying it, don't we? The die is not cast. It's just the beginning of this process. So please, can we, if you remember, there's a vote we ought to take, which is on the recommendation that we recommend endorsement of the preferred sites and second choice sites as suitable for consultation. In terms of time, I'm happy, unless somebody desperately wants to second it, I'm happy just to propose that from the chair. Could we go to a vote on that now, please?
Yes, Chair. Members, please press your green tick if you're in support of that recommendation. Press your red cross if you're against that recommendation, or raise your electronic hand to indicate you're abstaining from the vote.
Can I have a point of clarification, please, Chair, from yourself?
Yeah, of course.
And that is some of the sites, and I'm just going to pick up on one of mine, for example, Plimtree, who won in the sites are there, and they're not preferred sites because they're not registered. Are they going through the process? Because I thought that's what we've been doing this afternoon.
So my understanding is that everything that is in the documents at the moment as being proposed to go out for consultation goes out for consultation. That's right.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Just clarity. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt, yes. Oh, sorry.
Yes. Sorry, just to clarify, Chair, it's the first and second choice sites that are going out to consultation in that context. I think we're I'm trying to remember where we got to now. I think where we got to was that the third choices would be there in the information, but they wouldn't be front and centre of the consultation fundamentally. They will be there, but they won't be front and centre. It's the first and second choice sites that will be at the forefront of the consultation.
And we can discuss that more, as well, as I said, at agenda item 8 at the next meeting on the 4th. So, Councillor Pratt, please.
Yeah. Chair, thank you. Should it be public consultation, to put it correctly? I think
yes, I'm happy to accept that as an amendment to that. Thank you. To note that. Okay, so one more time then, we recommend endorsement of the preferred sites and second choice sites as suitable for public consultation. Can we then, Richard?
Chairman, it's Damien, just to prove that I've been listening along. Do you have a seconder for that proposal?
From the chair, the almighty power of the chair.
You don't need one, do you not?
No.
Well, there we go, then I stand corrected.
Well,
the power they've given to you.
Can't you feel the heat of the power coming from policy there? I think it's outrageous, but anyway.
Okay, no problems.
Richard, you've got a comment to make, I think, as well.
Just a quick question, Chair. The sites that are going forward for consultation, they don't include those with the noughts against them, do they? All of those sites that we've looked at this afternoon, some of them have got noughts against. They don't figure in the consultation. Is that correct?
Ed, do you want to give a definitive answer on that?
Well, I think this is what Councillor Skinner was getting at as well. I mean, fundamentally, I think we're saying the preferred allocations and the second best sites are the ones that would be in the consultation and will be front and foremost in the consultation. I'm trying to remember at this point in the day what we said about the third choice ones. They will certainly be in there somewhere, even if it's just as options that we've discounted. We still need to document that they're in there and give people an opportunity to comment on them. But I think in terms of what was going to be shown in terms of the sites for people to directly comment on, sort of in the commonplace software, there'll be a map of basically showing the sites. It's the first and second choice sites that would be shown in that location where we would be directly seeking views. I think the third choice sites, all the other sites would be alternative options that we've discounted that are there in the documentation and people can comment on them, but we wouldn't necessarily be directing specific questions on those options, if that makes sense.
Okay, Richard, we can interrogate that more.
Thank you. It doesn't actually, because what have we done this afternoon then? I've got to, let me just get some clarity here. So we got to Plimtree and we were going to discuss Plimtree. So I discussed Plimtree and I said about the site that I wanted to put in. Yes, that was all okay. That was all going to go forward. That's what I thought we were putting forward. So what you're saying, what is being said now is that the first and second tier sites are going to go through to the documentation. And as a backdrop, so for instance, Plimtree haven't got any, so it won't have any sites at all. That's what you're saying. And the same with Broadhenbury.
I don't think that is what's being said, is it, Ed?
Well, through you, Chair, I was half expecting from the conversation I'd had with Councillor Skinner earlier in the week that he was going to make a proposal that certainly the site at Plimtree that he mentioned the members advisory panel earlier in the week, I thought he may put forward a motion that it be included as at least the second best site based on the conversation earlier in the week, which is up to him. I stand by officer's recommendation on that one based on the information that we have. But I did wonder when we were discussing Plimtree whether or not Councillor Skinner meant to put forward a motion in terms of that. So obviously that's up to him.
Can I just be clear? I wouldn't have accepted that motion today because I'm going on the published agenda. Now, if in some way that comes through the consultation, and that's absolutely appropriate, then that's fine. But today hasn't been about individuals, whatever, one in, one out. We just can't do it like that. And that hasn't been the way we've been doing it for tiers 1, 2, 3 or 4. We just need to get them out to consultation. I hope that's okay.
Well, right. Actually, to be honest, so what we've done this afternoon, really and truly, been through the villages, we've wasted the time.
No, you haven't. What you've done is you have been, no, this is critical. As elected members, you have managed to represent the views, your own views and those of your constituents to this committee, which are now literally physically recorded. You then have the opportunity through the consultation to put those views in writing. And that's what this process is. We can't do it. There's no way. This would have taken 6 months to go through if in every single village, hamlet, settlement, we'd have been one in, one out, one. We could have spent, I mean, Richard has been incredibly civilized about this. We could probably have spent, 2 weeks just on Wimple. It needs to go to consultation. This isn't the moment for trying to get one in the last minute. So can we just go then to the vote again, please? Whoever's leading us through the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, just to remind you that if you are in support of the recommendation, please press your green tick. If you are against the recommendation, press your red cross. Or if you wish to abstain, please raise your electronic hand.
Okay, the votes are just coming in. So we have 1 abstention, 3 votes in support and 3 votes against.
Okay, in which case, probably hideously, it comes to a casting vote, does it? Would that be correct?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair, sorry. As Chair, you have that extra vote as a casting vote.
Okay, in which case, and I hope it's not causing any offence, because this is inconsistent in people voting against where they were quite happy to vote with it, exactly the same process for 1 and 2. I will nevertheless cast the vote in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you very much. That means the recommendation is carried and it'll be recommended up to senior officers.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Apologies, Chair. May I just clarify something I said earlier, because I'm just checking my report to your next meeting on the consultation, and I've just realised that we have actually said that what we would do with the maps in the consultation is show all of the sites, so the first, second choice sites and those that have been dismissed on those maps. So it would actually be all of the sites that are in the report that would be shown in the consultation traffic lighted, so that the preferred options would be shown in green, the second choice is in amber, and those that have been dismissed, i.e. the ones that had zeros next to them, would be shown in red. Apologies, it's a long day, but
yeah,
that is what we would be doing. Yes.
Okay, very good.
Apologies
so,
for that.
No problems at all. I blame Councillor Leisure for going home or something. I don't know, he disappeared. His name is taken. Right, very good. Thank you very much. There is a form of words I meant to use to close this meeting, and I will desperately try and remember what it is. Thank you very much for attending the meeting today, thank you to all those who've been looking at it online. Please, members, remember that until you are told by the DSCO that we are offline, anything you are